Okay, welcome everyone. Today is Monday, September 23rd, 2024, and this is a regular meeting of the City of Asbury Park Planning Board. Chairman Goonan, can you please call this meeting to order?
Yep. This meeting is being held in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law, 1975. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the Coaster and Asbury Park Press by publication of the annual meeting notice and posted on the municipal bulletin board and municipal website. All notices are on file with the board secretary. Official action may be taken on the following matters before this board. Fire exits are located on the east and west sides of council chambers as well as the back of the building. I will ask everyone with a cell phone or other device to kindly silence your device for the duration of this meeting. This meeting is being recorded by APTV. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will now take roll call. James Bonanno.
Here.
Councilwoman Clayton is present. Eric Gallipo.
Here.
Jim Henry.
Here.
Jeremy Hoffman is absent this evening. Mayor Moore.
Here.
Daniel Shenamayo. Jen Souter.
Here.
Vice Chair Goonan.
Here.
And Chairwoman Barbara Kurzak is absent this evening.
All right, we have two applications on the agenda for tonight, so a lot to get through. So we're going to get started with 1210 Springwood Avenue, the Memorial Center. Jen is going to recuse from this one.
Jen and Yvonne will be recused.
Yep. But we have 6 eligible people to vote, so we are all set to go.
Okay,
Please take us away.
Six eligible, okay, certified.
Just before we start, we don't have a resolution to approve? We don't have any
We do not.
business?
No.
Okay.
Straight into it.
Dan has a resolution, so he asked me. And I understand that Mayor Moore, you're certifying that you listened to the records from the prior meetings?
Watched and listened to them.
Okay, and Eric, you've also listened to as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone here is eligible.
Excellent, so there's
Thank
6
you.
eligible. Thank you very much. John Marmora for the applicant, Interfaith Neighbors. When we were last here, I'm sure those who were here anyway recall, we got through quite a bit of testimony. We'll be quick tonight. I don't want to give short shrift. If you have questions, certainly we'll pull back and answer whatever you want, but we'll put in our testimony fairly quickly because I believe Mr. Avakian's letter closed the loop on a couple of open questions. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Mr. Fitzgerald to complete the testimony that he began at the last hearing.
Okay, yes,
Swear or affirm that the testimony you'll provide this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And if you could just state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Yes, William E. Fitzgerald, Fitzgerald.
And you've been sworn in the past?
Twice.
For these
Yes.
hearings, right?
And qualified.
Right.
So when I was last testifying, I think we had pretty much discussed both the engineers and planners' earlier review letters and agreed that we would comply with everything to everyone's satisfaction. And it seemed that the only open item that Sam had was the concept of a construction sequencing and maybe traffic control. And so I prepared 2 exhibits. One of them's up on the board, one will be. By state statute, one of the sheets of the erosion and sediment control plan must have a sequence on a construction sequence. So naturally, we try to make it accurate because people rely on it for inspections, typically, or other activities during construction. The sequence typically has various activities during construction, getting ready, et cetera, and then a time frame associated with it. So what I've prepared for you tonight is what will be the anticipated construction sequence on that plan. However, because it's an exhibit, I've embellished it a little bit to make it easier to digest quickly. So all of my notes and remarks are at the end because I thought of them after I put it all together, but here's what's going on there. On this particular exhibit, the black print is what will actually appear on the erosion sediment control. And each of those items will have a time frame with it once I sit down with the architect and possibly contractor and get all of that squared away. The blue, next to the larger headings, kind of break the construction activity into a sequence of 3 items. Getting the site ready, doing the demo and clearing, doing the actual improvement construction. And under each of those, I have several categories or activities listed. The red apply specifically to this site for your purposes to try to address any specific interest you have. So I would think the most important thing to address is getting the site ready and how we control traffic. And for this particular site, what we anticipate is keeping Springwood Avenue pedestrian traffic open. And we would do that, I would suggest taking the one tree out and filling in the tree planting area with concrete temporarily. That way that's safe to walk on, and construct scaffolding and fencing around the entire site, scaffolding like you see in the city. I'll show you an example of one in a minute, to protect the Springwood Avenue sidewalk. There is no parking along the westerly side of Avenue A and along the northerly side of Adams. So we feel that we can close both of them off to pedestrian traffic and bring the fencing pretty much out, to protect the fencing pretty much out to the curb. And we would do a traffic control plan, which I'll get into a little more detail in a second. Atkins, we really have no construction activity within feet of the sidewalk other than bringing our internal sidewalk out to meet the existing sidewalk within the right-of-way. So again, what we plan to do is put the fence right along the property right-of-way line on Atkins Avenue. I don't know if, I've never really gone into detail on this kind of a thing with the board, but I mean, as I said, basically, it's all about getting the site ready, which is your traffic control and pedestrian protections, doing the demolition and clearing, at which point you put in right before that your erosion sediment control stuff. And once that's all in place and the site's ready, then you just build your construction improvements. I have another example just to illustrate. Okay, so what I have on this particular exhibit is a typical sidewalk. They call it temporary shedding, scaffolding, whatever you want to call it. But it has fencing right up against the construction and overhead protection should things fall inadvertently as things are being constructed, but it allows for pedestrians to go underneath. Typically, they are a minimum of 5 feet wide with a minimum of 8 foot of headroom, which seems like there'd be no problem. We will also be doing, to comply with requirements and also to make sure everybody's on board, a pedestrian traffic control plan, and as necessary, a vehicular traffic control plan. There'll be some work along the curb lines of Springwood Avenue and along the curb line of Avenue A. And so those would require some temporary vehicular traffic control just to be sure everything is safe. So the manual on uniform traffic control devices has typical traffic control designs. This is just a typical one I pulled out of the manual. This is more geared toward pedestrian control. And this one includes a temporary crossing, which I think we would do along the southerly side of Adams, because if you recall, there's a restaurant on the corner of Adams and Avenue A, and so one could cross from the westerly side of Avenue A to the easterly side of Avenue A at the corner that the restaurant's on with a temporary crosswalk. Other than that, the symbols that and signs and barricades and all that you must use are all spelled out in the manual on uniform traffic control devices, and we would employ them. And per Sam's recommendation, we would coordinate that with the City Department of Public Works, but I'd also contact the police department, especially the traffic bureau, because they may have some input that would be valuable. So other than that, we have no problem complying with any of that or anything else. And I haven't answered any questions yet, so.
So is the shed right around the corner? The sidewalk shed?
Okay, so the shed would go, it doesn't go around the corner. I'm envisioning it, I mean, I'm open to suggestions.
So
but-
the hatch, but the hatch, I mean,
Oh, that's just, I'm not, that's their symbols. I'm not sure what that has nothing, that's not our specific site. That's just a typical traffic control plan pulled out of, we have to do a plan.
the should be lit underneath at night? Is there lighting?
Oh, yeah, it would have to be safe, certainly. So, we can,
The
there's,
shed's just gonna be on Springwood?
yes, along the Springwood frontage of the site, right against the building facade.
Because the other pedestrian walkway is closed.
We're gonna close, yeah, there's no reason not to close with safety issues, Adams and Avenue A. As I said, there's no parking on the frontages of this site, so it doesn't really
So I'd say thank you for providing this. A standard condition of approval is always to have a pre-construction meeting with James, and there's other few city officials there, right?
No, it's just me.
Just you. So, do you have any?
Yeah, as long as you provide a site plan that I can see everything. I want to know the estimated amount of months it'll take for construction, and what time of year you plan to do construction, and if any, street space you plan to use, whether it's parking or street space during the project. Like if there's anything you need a crane for, and you know you're going to be using street space, I just need to know where you're planning to put it and generally estimate when.
Okay, I haven't got all of that. As I explained, that'll all be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you do the pre-construction.
That's not during the planning board. You'll do that after you get
Correct.
approval. You'll come to me and we'll have a discussion about that, but you'll have to provide that for me.
No problem at all.
And Sam, was there anything else from your end?
No, Chairman, I think that it's positive to keep Springwood open. Is it only one tree that will be removed, Bill? Because I think there might be more.
Adams and Avenue A, we should close the sidewalks on both of them.
Yeah, so no, I think it's
Great.
positive.
And that tree was going to be removed anyway, right?
Right.
And then as far as the stormwater management, I know we talked about it a lot last time, your letter.
Yeah,
You're good.
I was able to review it all. Bill and I had discussions. I think it's more than adequate now.
Okay, great, thank you. Do we need to get these guys sworn in? Donna and Sam?
You swear or affirm that any testimony you provide this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board for this witness? Sorry, did you have anything else?
No, only the audience. I haven't answered any questions from the audience yet.
Great, and just before we do that, Donna and Sam, any other questions from you guys?
No, sure, thanks.
All right, any questions from the audience for this witness? Yeah, you can get up and go to the microphone if you have questions for this witness. After testimony is done, we'll have a period of public comment where members of the public can provide their opinions about the project, but for now, it's just questions from this witness.
Yvonne Clayton. Excuse me. My concern is for the building next door to the construction and has a brand-new roof. I want to know how this building is going to be protected during your construction period.
Well, how many feet are we from the line? 5 feet, I think we are from the property line, correct? Or no, we only have. Okay, I think the architect can answer that better, but it's really, all there is an alley between them. It's possible to put up netting or scaffolding to protect, but we don't have that much room on our site, I don't believe. It's got to all be done pretty tightly. Maybe what we can do is sit down and meet. Because if they can erect netting or scaffolding that overlaps onto that property just temporarily while they're putting the masonry up, they would do everything they need to protect it, but they need your approval to do that.
You know, there's a concern because of debris, anything that could fall off the building, materials, tools, and as I said, it is a new roof that has just been constructed, and plus we'll be doing other work. So I just want to know what your plans are. If you don't have an answer tonight, that's fine, but...
No, but we can sit down with you and talk through that and make sure that you're comfortable with it.
Okay.
I think that would be a good way to go about it.
So traditionally, you would put up some type of netting if you're this close to the vicinity. Also, the contractor will have a pre-construction meeting, but if it were to be approved, additionally, they have all kinds of bonding performance and maintenance. Like if something were to occur to the roof, it would have to, like I said.
Well, performance bond's not going to cover,
Well,
Their property.
Insurance, their property, well, right.
Yeah.
They're selling, so it wouldn't, if something were to occur, we'd be responsible, they would be responsible. Right.
But we don't want anything to occur.
yeah, we want to try and avoid anything happening, so.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Questions for this witness? Oh, we did. John had one question for you before you go. Go ahead.
Watching the tape and the film, for the garbage room, you said 11 65-gallon Robo cans, and for the recycling, 16 65 Robo cans. The ordinance doesn't say how many gallons, but the ordinance does say, because you said it may be a city pickup, you're not sure yet. The cans cannot weigh more than 60 pounds.
Correct.
So DPW, as much as it's not in the ordinance, does recommend 55-gallon cans. So I just want that.
Okay, I have no problem. I put that on there because I have a 64-gallon can, and I can tell you, we don't load it past 60 pounds, but I know if they recommend that, well, it's not a problem.
That's fine. Stipulate to that as well.
Do you have anyone else for us today?
The board had questions about lighting. This will be very brief, I promise. Our lighting expert. If we could just bring him up, Jason Bradshaw. All right, while we're waiting for that, why don't you identify yourself for the record?
Yeah, and we'll swear you in. Mr. Bradshaw, you swear you or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And if you could just, again, state your name and spell your last name for the record, please.
Yep, my name is Jason Bradshaw, Bradshaw.
You want to qualify?
Yeah, would you just explain your credentials and your relation to the project?
Absolutely. So I'm a lighting designer for Beam Ltd. I've been a lighting designer for the past 9 years. I hold my LC Lighting Certified Professional certification from the NCQLP, and I was hired to design the exterior lighting for this project.
Present him as an expert in lighting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, why don't you explain then specifically the board's question about the exterior lighting?
Yeah. Do you want me to give you a brief walkthrough of the lighting of the project to start with? So the design intent for the lighting was to provide safe and secure lighting while not overlighting for the project location. We start with the egress lighting and then have some minimal building accent lighting and lighting for the balconies. Diving into it, where we have the egress, where we have a solid wall, solid partition, we have a wall pack mounted to the wall near or above the door. This is a downlight only light, low glare, and it really just lights the area of the path that needs to be illuminated. On the Springwood Ave corner, with the main front facade, we have a full glazed wall, so we mounted a linear flexible light at the shelf that juts out from the architecture. It'll trace that form and that shape, and that is the RD1 on the plans. Its main function is egress lighting, but like I said, it does have the added benefit of providing minimal accent to the building to provide a nice frontage to the building. Moving to the walkway to and through the covered parking area, we have one pole light outside of the parking area to provide, again, really focused light on that egress path. And then once you're inside the covered portion, we have the SD3, which is just a ceiling mounted cylinder downlight that again focuses light primarily on the path of egress. It also has the benefit of providing a visual break between the garage and the building itself, really defining that pedestrian zone. And then within the garage, we have typical garage style luminaires, low glare, and we have them spaced in order to meet the township ordinance of the 0.5 foot candles. One of the challenges of this project was the proximity of the property line to the building. So in order to meet code required lighting, we had to exceed the 0.1 foot candles at the property line in order to provide the code required amount of lighting. We have noted that where we have it on the plan, and we've limited it to those areas. And then additionally, at the garage, in order to meet the minimum lighting in the garage specified by the ordinance, we had to exceed the property line value once again. To help put everyone at ease and to show that we're really not adding a significant amount of light to the property, to the area, we did provide a street lighting plan that shows the existing lighting levels. We did have to make some assumptions on the lamping of the exterior lights, but it's well within your normal typical township light. And if you compare the two, you'll see that the amount of light that our building is providing with the lighting is minimal or equal to the lighting provided by the street lighting that exists already. The next sheet goes through the different calculations that we ran and the statistics for those calculations. It goes through each of the luminaires and provides a description for them, and it shows that they are either all no uplight in compliance with dark sky, or if there is a minimal amount of uplight that is undercover. So like in the garage light has a minimum amount of uplight, but since it's covered, none of that will escape into the sky. So all of the lighting does meet dark sky requirements. In addition, all of the lighting we're proposing is 2700 Kelvin, except for the street lighting, which I understand is the typical pole for Springwood Avenue. That is 3000 K. And in our calculations, we did adjust for all of the outputs, the color temperature, and any other anomalies to be able to provide a realistic understanding of what illumination levels are on the ground. And then just very quickly, the upper levels, we have fairly simple surface-mounted downlights at the trellis structures and recessed downlights where we do have a building overhang. Again, these are downlight only, and they are really targeted at the balcony floor area themselves and will not provide additional light beyond. So in terms of the engineering questions, I know that there were a few. Just get those real quick.
I do think you hit them.
I hit them all? Okay.
In your professional opinion, is this lighting satisfactory for this project?
Absolutely.
Does it provide any spillage that you would consider excessive?
No.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I have nothing further for the witness then.
There was a question about, in Springwood, was about the secondary egress.
If you wanted an opaque glass?
Right, about about the lighting.
So that was
in there.
the light inside the building
Light inside the building.
that could be shining through the windows in the egress tab. Yeah. Did you design the interior lighting at all, just the exterior?
We have not designed the interior lighting, but what we can do is ensure that it's a specification grade luminaire with a nice glare-free frosted lens, and also it can have an occupancy sensor that dims it when it's not in use. So that way it dims down to a low level and it's not obtrusively bright.
So I want
There's a talk that in several stories it would be first we're talking about transparent glass, right?
Right.
That would be illuminated at night out in the street.
Correct.
Yes.
So, there was
So I want
issues
to.
whether to be opaque panels or to do something with the light. So it would not come out to the street or close to it.
So we had decided last time, Dan, to make it a condition they had to mitigate light spillage from stairwell 1. So they'll have to come up with a plan that will have to be approved by CCH during resolution compliance.
Right.
And just so that we're understanding what the goal is, I do want to recommend that we maintain a clear transparent glass in that stairwell. It's a safety thing. We might be able to do something with either narrowing the pane of glass or doing 2 panes, one's clear, one's frosted or opaque. But I think the best solution is to design lighting for within that stairwell that, like you said, can be dimmer when it's not used.
Unoccupied, yep.
Yeah. And again, meets our objective, which is not to be visible from the outside of the building as being, obtrusive.
I assume it can't be motion, right?
I don't know, as an emergency egress, if it has to stay illuminated.
It can be on sensor. It can be motion, as far as I know. I just don't think it can go off, which is why I would suggest it dim down to a
Maybe
very low
dim.
level.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions from the board of this witness? Any questions from our professionals? Does anyone from the public have questions for this witness? All right.
Our last witness is our planner, Jim Higgins, who will take you through the variance proofs.
Good evening.
Evening, Mr. Higgins. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And again, if you could state your name and spell your last for the record.
James W. Higgins, Higgins. I am a licensed planner in the state. I've been licensed for about 45 years, and my license is current.
I think you've been accepted by this board in the past as an
Yes,
expert.
yes, I have by this board and the zoning board in Asbury Park.
Propose Mr. Higgins as an
Yes.
expert in planning.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Jim, I'll suspend the question and answer. Let me just take
Okay.
a run through
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Well, this site is located in the neighborhood commercial section of the Springwood Avenue redevelopment plan. And it's an unusual site. In fact, it's unique within that neighborhood commercial area because it has 4 street frontages, as opposed to most of the other properties in that zone either have 2 street frontages, they're corner lots, or 1 street frontage if they're an interior lot. And what the ordinance requires is that the building have a 0-foot front setback, which makes sense along Springwood Avenue. And the plan really wants to create an atmosphere that's pedestrian friendly along Springwood Avenue, which this application does by placing the building with a 0-foot front setback along Springwood Avenue. The other streets, you have Avenue A and Adams Avenue. Avenue A, the building is set back 3.5 feet from the right-of-way line, from the front line, and along Adams Avenue, it's 5 feet. And the reason for that is that during preliminary discussions with municipal officials at various times, it was suggested that maybe some landscaping should be put along those rights of way to soften the view, and I think actually makes it more pedestrian friendly than having the buildings right up on the property line. So I think that's an advantage there. And then when you go to Atkins Avenue, the building is set back about 39 feet. And the reason for that is to allow for the community garden, which again is a substantial benefit, I think, in this instance, both aesthetically and functionally. It helps meet the needs of the neighborhood residents, and that's one of the purposes of the neighborhood commercial zone in this district. So when I look at that, and I look at the other benefits that this application is providing, including the museum, including providing housing for, again, a variety of income levels in the city. 2 of those units will be affordable units, and 4 of them will be market rate units. And again, that goes towards the goals of the redevelopment plan, which is to provide the availability of adequate and appropriate housing alternatives for neighborhood residents of all income levels. So when I look at that, I think there are substantial benefits to the granting of the application as it's presented, including the variances that are being requested. And I don't see any substantial negative impact. What you have there is an unsightly vacant property right now And this will actually enhance the zone and enhance the area, the neighborhood in which it's located. And I think there's substantial benefits and no substantial negative impacts.
Anything further?
No.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Questions from our professionals? And any questions from the public of this witness? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else for us tonight?
No, that'll be it. I just wanted one clarification. Actually, all 8 units will be affordable. 2, but pursuant to the state standard, and then 6, the federal HUD standard. So what we're calling market units are still actually affordable pursuant to HUD regulations rather than state regulations.
Okay. Let's open it for public comment then. I'll make a motion to open for public comment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. So anyone from the public, if you have comments about this application, you have 3 minutes. You can say whatever you'd like about this application. So you can go up to the microphone. Great.
Hello, Jen Souter, 1403 3rd Avenue. Also board president of the Asbury Park African American Music Project that owns the adjacent building that's on that lot. I just wanted to make a comment and...
Jeff, do you have to swear in?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
You swear or affirm that the testimony you provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And just spell your last name, Jennifer.
S as in Sam, O-U, D as in David, E-R.
Thank you.
I'd just like to make a couple comments. One, we appreciate the attention the changes that have been made to the design through the course of this process. And I just want to reiterate the concern regarding protecting the turf club during construction. We know that it's a very, very tight, that the whole construction process is very tight. Our property lines are very, very close. And so we want to do everything that we can to work with Interfaith to protect the turf club during construction in whatever mechanisms we can use, because we know that it's going to be, we're going to be neighbors, and it's really important that we work together, but also the building is going through historic designation process, and there's a lot of things happening on our site as well, so we want to be very careful to work together to protect in every way that we can and figure out ways to do that preemptively. A second comment, which is, I know last meeting we talked about, this is a small thing, but the trees on Atkins, and there was a concern, I think there's a columnar species proposed. I don't know where it ended up, but there was a concern about shade on the community garden. I just wanted to say I do not share that concern. I think that the street trees, especially the ones proposed, would not present a problem in terms of shading that area, and that the street trees are pretty important because it does get very hot along that street. And so just wanted to make that comment, and I think that, yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Anyone else with comment?
Motion to close.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. So board members, thoughts, anything you want to discuss about this project?
Where did we land with the trees on Atkins Avenue? Because I agree with what Jen just said. The shade tree is more beneficial to the streetscape and everything in the area rather than just a garden.
We landed on, we were going to make a condition, we need to coordinate street trees with the board planner and the Shade Tree Commission.
And we have no problem with that as a condition.
Does that work? Anyone else from the board? Comments? Concerns? Okay. So I have a list of conditions that we come up with. So I'm going to throw these out there, and then if anyone has anything to add or anything we should take out, we can go from there. So it's actually a pretty long list of conditions. One was you guys had agreed there would be addition of public art in coordination with the Public Art Commission. You would submit a checklist of green building initiatives. There needs to be adequate maintenance of the pervious pavement system. Need to mitigate light spillage from stairwell 1, which we just discussed. Utilities need to be underground. You need to coordinate street trees with the planner and Shade Tree Commission. And completion of the off-site parking agreement, and one that I just added that we can discuss is a plan to protect the surf club during construction, to be approved at the pre-construction meeting.
I think that last one should just be in
Surf
general
club.
neighboring turf properties.
Turf club.
Yeah.
Michael,
What's
I
that?
think that last one just should be in general neighboring properties, not just
Neighboring properties.
specified any specific property.
Great. Anything else?
Okay. I don't know.
It's okay.
Anything else we need to include? Okay. I'm going to make a motion to approve this application with the conditions I just listed.
Second.
James Bonanno,
Yes.
Eric Gallipo,
Yes.
Jim Henry,
Yes.
Mayor Moore,
Yes.
Daniel Shinameo,
Yes.
Vice Chair Goonan.
Yes. All right.
Thank you, we appreciate your time. I think we came to a good place with it working together, but thank you very much.
You want to take a back? Why don't we take a 5-minute break and then we're going to go to the Delta Townhouse development. Motion to take a break. All in favor? Aye.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to take roll call so we can get back to order. James Bonanno. Councilwoman Clayton.
Oh, yes, here.
Eric Gallipo.
Here.
Jim Henry.
Here.
Jeremy Hoffman is absent. Mayor Moore.
Here.
Daniel Shinameo. Jen Souter.
Here.
Vice Chair Mike Goonan.
Here.
And Chairwoman Barbara Kurzak is absent this evening.
Our next application is the Delta Townhouse development. Take us away.
Great.
So just for the record, before we start, Eric Gallipo and Mayor Moore have both signed certifications, so everyone here is qualified to continue to listen and, if necessary tonight, to deliberate any final decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we were here last on September 9th, and at that time, we had gotten through the architecture testimony, but there was a question about the renderings as viewed from Webb Street. So we are going to ask our architect to go through that in just a moment, just to sort of cap off his testimony, since that was an open question from last time. I will say we still have several witnesses to get through this evening, including our landscape architect, our civil engineer, and our planner. And specifically, where there's questions about where the driveways line up with houses on the other side of Webb Street, that will be addressed by our civil engineer. So those questions, if they come up now, are really more for the civil engineer, just kind of giving that as a preview. So with that, I would like to recall our architect, Adrian Melian.
And you understand you're still under oath from the last hearing?
Yes, I do.
And you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And again, just for the record, if you can just state your name and spell your last.
Sure, it's Adrian Melia, M-E-L-I-A.
Right. When you were here last, you presented depictions of each of the sides of the development, except for along Webb Street. I'd like to mark what you have up on here as exhibit, I believe we're up to A4. If you could describe what this is and how it depicts how the buildings may look along Webb Street.
Okay, so this view of the proposed project is looking across Webb Street to the east. It's zoomed out so that you can see all three buildings that front onto Webb. 8th Avenue is to the left and 7th Avenue is to the right. The street trees have just been omitted for clarity. There are street trees here. There's 5 of them proposed. There'll be 1 in front of the 4-story townhome fronting on 8th. There'll be 2 in front of the 3-story townhome in the center of the block. And there'll be 2 more in front of the 4-story fronting onto 7th. Again, it's just an additional view for the benefit of the neighbors because we didn't have this at the last meeting.
Okay. And the building along Webb Street, that is the 3-story building, correct?
Yes.
Those are all the questions that I have for our architect.
This grassy area doesn't exist, right? There's homes.
No.
No. Yeah. Just to be clear.
Again, this is a more reasonable view of what you'll see from the sidewalk across the street, but just to get the whole context in.
Just for the public, I want to
quarter mile
make
away.
sure we knew where we were.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I know that last time we didn't get to questions from the public for you. But before we do that, does anyone from the board have any questions for this witness about any of his testimony about architecture that we haven't discussed yet? Questions from our professionals about architecture?
So, all right, so let me take this in. So we have the two 4-story buildings on the extreme left and extreme right of the image, right? And those are the decks that overhang the garages that project out at the second level. Okay, and then, okay. So there's no, hang on. So there's no meters, there's no water sprinkler closets on these, the 4-story facades on this side. Is that correct?
Correct. The civil engineer can go into greater detail, but they're on the sides of the 3-story, which is concealed with landscaping.
Okay, but the 4-story ones are not on this frontage. Is that correct?
Correct. Say again?
I believe she's asking.
Yeah, so there's no sprinkler room on that building?
Correct.
On this end?
Correct.
Okay.
Not on this end.
And for those 4-story buildings, the meters would be on the eastern sides of the buildings?
Yes.
So the front facades of the buildings, you try to, articulate or differentiate between, one of the containers next to the other. But the rears are all the same, no differentiation. So in this kind of picture, I don't know from Webb Street if it looks like that from the side of Parallax view, but it seems like so much of the rears of these buildings are in fact visible and somewhat monolithic, that there's no differentiation.
Thank you. Very well said.
You're
So
correct.
if you change the view, zoom in tighter like you had shown before, this was really, and we were at this side, so yeah, that's what you're gonna see from that part of Webb Street, looking into the driveway.
Yeah. As far as articulation goes, they're stepped.
Okay.
But as far as, the treatment and fenestration, they're all similar. Colors they could alternate. In this view, they're all the same, but there's no reason why we couldn't alternate them.
And are there no partitions? So it's a deck, and then there's a space, and then another deck. So they don't actually touch each other, or are there any that are actually paired?
They're separated. It's not one continuous deck.
But no privacy between.
No, there's a distance between the decks.
In connection with the prior rendering that you put up there, where your comment was, well, the grass does not exist. In that rendering, is it fair to say that the two cars depicted are on Webb Street?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so
which is
really what you're talking about is quite a distorted view from that. The bottom half of that rendering can be ignored. You pick up at the cars at Webb Street and we see the buildings.
Exactly. It's only zoomed out so you can see all 3 buildings in one image, but the reality is if you're standing on the sidewalk on Webb facing this property, if you're standing in the middle of the block, it's more likely that this is your view. And if you're standing closer to the end, it's more likely that you're going to be facing directly toward the 4-story and the driveway. So you're never really going to see this entire block as shown on the screen.
It's going to be quite a bit closer to what you just put up.
Correct. If you zoom in.
Zoom in on
it. Depending on where you're standing on Webb, you're only going to see a portion of the overall image.
Okay. So the cars there are really what you're looking at and what's behind them, basically. That's what you see from Webb.
Correct. And again, the street trees aren't shown, but there'll be 5 street trees along this frontage.
So I'm just thinking to another project we had where, because there is going to be this whole row of cars parked in front of the garages, didn't we put an architectural wall up?
Yeah.
Is that something we think should be there?
That was a Kingsley frontage.
Yeah.
And that had a, more impactful streetscape. Not to say that's not warranted necessarily here, but, it's a side street compared to the avenue.
All right, can we see a close-up of the buildings that are on the end without the one that's in the center?
So right here?
Yeah, do you have a full view of that side?
Right. Those were shown at the first meeting. We had views of every elevation. I can pull it up.
And this would probably be going back into A2, which was the submitted architectural plans.
So you're asking for the view of the 4-story strings?
Yes.
Just give it a second.
I don't think we had a view of the corner there on 7th.
Yeah, that was it. So
Here we go.
Go.
So these are the elevations of the 4 stories on the corner. Minus this is the side that faces interior with the sprinkler closet, and this is the side that faces the street. So this would be the elevation on the right side of the original exhibit I showed.
So this is what the neighbors on the other side of the street are going to see?
So that would be on all
Yeah.
the corners, so I said?
From what?
You can see that on the corner. And Kingsley and 7th.
With the exception of there's no pergola on the strings on fronting onto Webb.
And there's
It might be helpful if you could go back through
no
the-
landscaping, nothing, just,
So we do have the landscape architect up next, who will talk about the landscaping around the buildings.
This is just an elevation view. It just shows
That's
the
all.
building, not in its setting.
But Donna's report also points out that the lack of sort of turning the corner creates on multiple frontages this sort of dead facade.
So if you want to maybe go back to the renderings that we had at the beginning,
So the pergolas are on the 2 corners on
Kingsley.
on Kingsley, but not on Wall.
Correct.
So we do have our landscape architect, as I said, who is going to show these buildings in the context of the landscaping that's proposed around each one, and that is our next witness up.
I know, who's going to talk about lighting?
Lighting will be largely our civil engineer. He'll be the
Okay.
third witness up today.
So, but also for clarity, this rendering doesn't depict any exterior light fixtures. This is just effectively the buildings.
Yeah,
that correct?
there's no dusk shot here. I mean, if we zoom in, you can see there's a light at the entry of each one.
Okay. What
Where-
about on the decks?
The
Can we see
signage
if
and
there's
then the
lights?
decks. You can see there's some at the garage door and
And
then
then one on
up
the-
above on the
okay,
decks.
So is there anything that board members would like to see potentially changed in the architecture? I know Dan just mentioned, like,
Yeah,
could we have...
vegetation in the rear.
Yeah, variation of color and materials in the rear. If that's something you guys would be amenable to, maybe you could show us options.
Yeah, Michael, I don't know, did you bring up about the wall or something in the street at the first to shield the parking spaces?
I mean, I mentioned that. I don't know if that's something people think should be there or not.
Well, Donna brought that up in her report.
Yes. Well, not on Webb Street. That's on the Avenue side.
Well, if you look at item 1.2 in your report, I think you pretty much cover the whole facade, all the facades of the building. Of all the buildings, it seems to me.
Well, this is about like the sides of the buildings we're talking about.
Well, she's talking,
Those,
as I read Donna's report, item 1.2 on page 1 of her report, she talks about all the facades of the building not being very friendly to the street.
agreed. But I think our recommendation, short of actually creating a corner building, was at 7th and Kingsley and 8th and Kingsley to connect those two frontages, the front of the Avenues facing building and the Kingsley facing building to be connected by a wall. Similar to what was recommended at Pulte site across from the Berkeley. And at the Baltic and the Aegean, where we did the seat wall all along Berg.
Right.
Right, to connect the two sites and create that streetscape.
So when should we talk? I guess that's not
So,
architecture. I guess
the
it's more
difficulty on the Webb Street side, and I know we haven't got really to the engineering side of this yet, but these buildings are very close to the property line. I don't know that we have room for a wall on Webb to do the screening. I mean, I like the idea, but there are some site distance problems. There are some, just logistics that might be problematic for that.
In connection with that, but not specifically to what the architect has said, your comments concerning your views from Webb Street and the concept that what you see from Webb is the garages, primarily from 7th and 8th Avenues. You can alleviate part of that. You have, I don't know what the southerlymost building, that the side is on Webb. If you look, the building on the right-hand side, that is parallel to 7th Avenue. If you change that and make it parallel to 8th Avenue, since Webb is one way north, you will see less of the garages. Assuming somebody riding in a car looks to the right, normally you won't look past 90 degrees. So if you make this parallel rather to 8th Avenue rather than 7th Avenue, you'll shorten that view of those garages.
I apologize, which building are you suggesting should be parallel?
If you look at the submission that dated September 13th, shows a layout of the buildings and the interior roadway.
You're talking about building number 1, right along 7th Avenue.
On 7th Avenue. You see that is parallel to 7th Avenue. As you ride up ride up Webb, what you see when you look to the right is you see the building, the garages. If you take and change that and make it parallel to 8th, you shorten the view that you will see from the car.
Do you mean parallel to Webb?
No, he's saying parallel 8th.
So that
There is
the-
one that's parallel to 8.
He's trying to say that the building's on an angle right now?
And what I'm saying is that the angle of the building is in connection with that lot.
Oh, it's following the street lines
Yeah.
rather than,
Yeah,
I see what you're saying.
The interior.
but it feels like it should follow the street line.
Well,
Agreed.
Okay.
maybe it should, but if you want to hide the view of those garages, it's a simple matter of just changing the angle.
There may be another way we can help buffer the garage, but to rotate the building has a lot of logistical issues. But I understand your comment, you want to screen the driveway as best we can.
Why is it logistical? Why is it a logistical problem?
Just because of the way townhomes are constructed, you want to rotate the building, if I understand you correctly.
Yeah.
So it would need to be constructed independently, or there would be a gap between the buildings where you're rotating them.
It's the same
Oh, you
layout
broke the
now,
building.
except you change the location of the green spaces between the buildings.
Right, I could have our civil
That's only a
engineer
suggestion.
right, address why the buildings are spaced that way for the drive aisles.
Yeah, I think there's an advantage to having the building front 7th Avenue. So, maybe there's a different opportunity to screen those garages rather than rotate the building. Jim brought this up too, and it's in Donna's report. The sides, so specifically the sides of the 4-story buildings, the corners of Kingsley and 7th and Kingsley and 8th. I know some effort clearly has been made to wrap the Kingsley Street frontage around the side, but you still do end up with a lot of blank wall. And I would just wonder if there's any opportunity to kind of, Donna said it well, to wrap the frontage around the corner a little bit more.
I believe on the one on the corner of Sunset and Kingsley, what we asked was for a secondary door on the corners.
Yes.
Is that correct?
There's an entry door that faces the opposite street from where the building faces.
Right.
And I think we did a similar thing with the Toll Brothers project
Yes.
too.
Yes.
Cookman and Lake.
Yeah. And there's also something that's a little bit atypical about the site plan here, which is the alignment of the buildings on 7th Avenue are parallel to the property line, which is not typical. And so when you look at the site plan, go here, this isn't going to show it very well. Do you have one that shows? There's one that has the site plan over the aerial.
That will be,
That's one, yeah.
that,
Yeah, so the typical arrangement is that this corner of the building would be aligned to the prevailing setback here. And so what these people have lost is their view shed down the... And so there's like a thing about this should be parallel, or should, essentially, you should have a wider gap at the last building than I'm calling it the last building, than the first building.
so I will just say this particular exhibit, we haven't actually presented yet. It will be presented by our civil engineer, just for the record, it hasn't been testified to yet. But it's been submitted and it will be testified to by our engineer.
But this speaks to the issue of this blank facade, because if somebody is approaching from this angle, this blank facade will be the most visible because of the angle of this block of buildings.
Could you chamfer the ground floor and make the entrance actually at the corner, slice off the corner?
I mean, I'm sure they don't want to, but...
I know, but
Eric?
So I will also say that,
To your point, if you change that building and make it parallel to the building on 8th, that's exactly what happens. And the green space on the...
Yeah, you end up with a wider green space here, and it shrinks as it comes to this side.
Or it stays there,
Yeah, pushing this...
Corner northward.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I had said
You
before.
maintain the view corridor.
Yes, and which is something we've been very particular about on a lot of applications all over the city. The view corridor down the street is a feature of the original city plan. And so maintenance of that view corridor, I think, should be a goal. And it would minimize the impact of these, as we're calling them, blank facades, on the Webb Street frontage. Now, I understand it probably causes some dimensional issues back here, but it's not something I'm totally sure.
Right, so we do have our civil engineer who can talk specifically to those dimensional issues that of what would happen if you move those buildings back into the drive aisles.
But you also have an angle here that doesn't exist anywhere else on the site. So something says to me that it's possible. You could shrink this edge. It resembles what's happening on the other side of the street.
And we'll have our civil engineer, because I do want to make sure that we have the right professional testifying about the site constraints and layout, and that is coming this evening. I will say, however, that the layout of this block and the design of the corners, we were in front of council for many, many months, refining and refining and refining. So this is not something that was just thought up overnight. It is something that's been worked on by the team and by the TRC and by the council over the course of, I've said last time, it took us a year to get from our TRC hearing to the planning board hearing, so during that time, there's a significant amount of refinement that happened. But that said, we do have our civil engineer. I would like to get to him tonight, because I think both our landscape architect and civil engineer will be able to answer a lot of these questions, more than just going through the architecture.
You can wait.
Well, I think it's fair. We're talking at a sort of 30,000 foot level here is, again, architecturally, view shed, the concept of this alignment, the building across the street, Rhythm, 2027, is not parallel. It is
It's at an angle.
at an angle to the street line to respect that alignment. So.
And then I guess on the question of architecture, I feel that there's too little variation in materiality across the entire facade frontages on all sides. I'm fortunately a little less concerned about the backs of the buildings because they're all interior facing, or mostly. And so the people who would be experiencing that, I would rather more attention be paid to the street side to create variation. It's an entire city block.
So what do you think, like variation of materials and colors between buildings?
I would think some rhythmic.
To make it more interesting, to give it some depth.
And the colors are also quite light.
And respectfully, the colors have changed at the specific recommendation of the TRC and then the council. We've gone through several color palettes here, and this was the one that ultimately was approved to get here. So it wasn't as if this was the first color palette that came up. This was the result of a year's worth of direction. And I understand color is subjective, but at some point, if we're asked to change it, and then we change it, and we change it, and change it, we reach the point where this is what came through the council, and what we're reflecting here is what was ultimately approved after those changes.
I respect that, but this is the planning board, and we have
Understood. I just don't want anyone to think that this was the first set of colors that was suggested. There was a lot of thought that went into it.
We appreciate that this has gotten here through many, many meetings with the city council, and that our job is to decide whether it conforms to the waterfront redevelopment plan and approve whether or not that is true or not. And so, however, there is comments in Donna's report that do talk about the lack of variation and whether that is conforming with the waterfront redevelopment plan. And unfortunately, it is a little bit lacking in variety.
And I was not privy to the conversations.
Nor were we.
But, perhaps, the base color palette was the problem, not that there needs to be, this broader refinement of that to, okay, distinguish between the buildings using this palette. I think that's fair.
I like the color palette overall, but to Eric's point, it's the same for all 6 buildings. So it's a big area.
It seems to me, they build the same stuff.
Yes, it also does feel a little bit familiar.
Just different color.
You know, I hate to say it, but it looks like an army barracks. It really does. Even the color. And well, there's not a lot of people on Webb Street that live there. There are people that do live there, and they deserve the best we can give them. And I don't know, this does not do anything for me. And I lived in places that looked like that, and they were, 65 years ago when I was in the Army.
So, just to be kind of constructive, some of the things I've written down, some of our suggestions that you guys can take or leave, was that we're kind of recommending maybe the colors and materials can be a little bit more varied and exciting throughout the project, treatment of corners, and consideration of the positioning and orientation of building number 1, specifically with regards to maintaining the view corridor on 7th Avenue. Is there anything else, anything else we might want to ask them to change?
Just the blank walls that are facing Webb to make them, I don't see any plantings. I don't see anything that makes any of that interesting.
Those are not shown in this.
And I know it's not shown, but if you're asking for suggestions.
Yeah, the treatment of the corners, right? The corners kind of on all 4 corners.
Yeah. So we do have testimony about all of this. So respectfully, if we could move to allow us to put in the rest of our testimony, that may help address some of the concerns that have been
Let's do
raised.
that. Before we do that, we have to get to public questions. So is there anything else from the board for this witness right now before we move on? Okay. Questions from our professionals? Anything we haven't touched on yet? Okay. Let's open up to questions from the public. So typically questions for the witness are only what they testified to tonight, but we never opened for questions to this witness from last time. So anything he's testified to last time or this time, you can ask him about.
Yeah, I just have a question in terms of the frontage. I'm not an architect, so I just want you to help me explain
Can you
this.
speak into the microphone?
Oh, sorry. I actually do live at that corner that's going to have that angle spitting out. So I'm 301 7th Avenue, the corner of 7th and Webb. So that's my house in the lower corner.
Can you just state your name as well, please?
Elaine Rocha, 301 7th Avenue, corner of Webb. So I am curious in terms of the gentleman on the board, I don't know your name, but you did raise the point in terms of why that portion is angled to the left versus the other is like perpendicular. That's a question. And also just again, from an architectural standpoint, we keep talking about Webb, and that seems like a third of the street, to be frank. There's 2/3 of the street that are either driveways or buildings, so I don't understand how we're talking about that bit is Webb, but like technically there's large swaths of the technical street are actually on Webb, and that's the 4-story side, meaning if the frontage is like 40 feet and the front of 7th Avenue, each unit is 20 feet, why is it de facto defaulting to the 4-story 7th Avenue height versus a 3-story on Webb? Because a majority of the building is now on Webb Street. Does that make sense? Are you getting my question?
You're asking why don't these buildings on the end step down to 3?
Yeah, exactly, because a majority of that side frontage seems to be on Webb. And again, I'm not an architect, I didn't develop the plan, but in staying with the city plan, it seems like we're trying to keep consistent with the area, and to your point, city ocean views and breezes and all that good stuff. So I just want to understand a little bit about...
To be fair, up to 8 stories are permitted.
On Kingsley?
Yes, and
I think I was...
And at the corner of Webb.
And at the corner of Webb.
On the
And
Avenue.
so that 4-story is
What
permitted.
page is that in the plan? I have the plan up.
57?
And we will have our planner specifically talk about the heights that are permitted. And I'm sorry, I have to talk this way and back.
No, that's fine.
So,
I read the plans.
but we will have our
We will hear about
planner.
development control plan and all that.
Correct. We will have him discuss where the permitted heights are, but you are correct that there are large portions of this block that could be up to 8 stories, and are only proposing up to 4.
So we will get a better answer to that question, but from a different witness. Okay?
I mean, I am an attorney by trading. I'm just being straight up. I read all the plans cover to cover, so I don't remember seeing 7th and Webb having 8 stories, to be frank. I'd like to see that.
Hi, Karen May, 301 8th Avenue. So question for the architect. The picture, can you go to the picture with the park-like look from Webb? Yeah. So we've already agreed and you've acknowledged that that green space does not exist because one of the door steps is actually 9 steps from the sidewalk. But visually, that small building facing Webb, that's the 3-story building. Visually, to me, it looks to be almost the same height as the 4-story buildings on either side, and that you can't see the 4-story building that sits behind it.
We need a question.
So the question, am I interpreting that, but am I seeing this correctly? Because I would think that a 3-story building, I'd be able to see the 4-story building behind it, yet I can't.
This is a perspective view.
Right.
If it were an elevation view, you would see the 4-story building behind it. So this imagines you're standing on the ground and you're a person.
Right.
The building that would be beyond it would have to be quite tall in order for you to see it. So you are not misinterpreting that this is a 3-story building here.
Okay.
And there is a 4-story building beyond it. But the way a camera works, you have to think about it like the way a camera works.
Right.
And so that building that is 4 stories beyond it would not be seen in a perspective view.
But the buildings to the 2 sides are also 4 stories and they appear to be the same height.
That is also a camera thing. So as you move away from the center line of the camera, the height appears to get shorter.
Interesting.
However, it is a 4-story building and a 3-story building.
Like that picture of President Carter and his wife?
Yes.
And the Obamas? And
Yes.
they seem like giants because they're on, it's perspective. Okay, okay. I put numbers in little boxes, so.
Just to answer the question, the 3-story buildings are shorter in height than the 4-story buildings.
Yes, they are, yeah.
Okay. And then the landscaping, you said the landscaping person will be talking later to get into the trees and the actual, who answers the distance between the curb, the sidewalk, and then the buildings?
That'll be the civil engineer.
That's the civil, thank you.
Mike Cizorek, 305 8th Ave. I'd just like to echo Eric's point on the 7th Ave, the setback and maintaining the corridors, line of sight.
Just understand, this is not for comments, this is only for questions.
Okay.
Questions of the architect's testimony from the last hearing in this evening.
Okay, got it. So the setback on 8th Avenue, does that mirror the houses that are on 8th Avenue? Is that parallel with the houses?
So
How
I
do you
can-
guys calculate that, I guess?
Our civil engineer can testify
Okay.
about the actual
We haven't gotten to
setbacks.
the site plan yet, so when we get to the site plan, we'll probably better time to discuss that.
And street widths on 8th Avenue, also civil engineer?
Correct.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm Neil Wood, 300 7th Ave. I'm diagonal. We're at the southwest corner of 7th and Webb. So if you could pull up that perspective again from Webb. So I'm wondering what can indeed be done with those 2 4-story walls that I'll be looking right at to soften them. And I don't believe landscaping is going to cover up a 4-story wall.
No,
My
it's
other
not.
concern is, as one of the board members brought up, or a couple, the rear of the buildings, the kind of military barracks, I was thinking a 1960s motel, really. They look pretty shabby. And that's what I'll be staring at, as well as a couple other people in this room.
Do you have a question?
What can be done to soften those walls to start?
We do have street trees that will be in front of the buildings. So there's going to be 2 street trees in front of the building facing 7th and 1 in front. There's only room for 1 because there's street poles and so forth. There's only 1 tree in front of this one, and there's 2 trees in front of the 3-story. There's 5 total street trees.
Okay,
It will help shield a lot of the side elevation.
Okay, I don't know that'll be enough, but understood. And if it's going to remain 4 stories, going down to 3 would be better, as Eileen said, but, and as far as architecturally along the back of the buildings, the decks and such that we're seeing, is there anything that can be done there to make it look less plain?
I think we touched on changing color scheme. So maybe alternating the color palette.
It's still just going to be straight walls, though?
Well, they are stepped. They do jut in and out, so it's not one continuous wall.
It looks it, though. So maybe with the color change, it could soften it some.
Yeah, it's primarily that view that doesn't help, but you can see that they are staggered.
It's obnoxious for everybody on Webb Street. That's it. No other questions right now. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public questions for this witness?
The last meeting I was here, my name is John Frederickson, and I live at 803, 308, no, 303, thank you. I'm sorry. 303 8th Avenue. And the last meeting, when I saw the 3-story buildings, they were in the middle of Webb Street, and they were right up to the end of Webb Street. Okay, and then there was a building down this way and a building down this way. Okay, and we were told these were going to be 3 feet, and then the rest was all going to, not 3 feet, 3 stories, and the rest was all going to be 4 stories on these 2 sides. That's not what I see today. I see, if you can go to the picture one.
So it's the same plans last meeting and this meeting. So the site plan and the architectural plans have not changed from last meeting.
Okay, well, I'm talking about this picture, okay? This picture, if you transform that into the last meeting and what they said, that center area would be pushed all the way to Webb Street, okay?
It is. Where the cars are is Webb Street.
Yeah, the cars are over Webb Street, but you see these 2 sides here?
Yeah.
They didn't exist. They were that 3-story area was pushed all the way to Webb Street. They're not pushed all the way to Webb Street here.
So I think maybe having our civil engineer can testify as to the location of the fronts of the buildings relative to the sidewalk.
Yeah, you'll have additional testimony from the civil engineer about the layout of the entire block.
Okay.
And what buildings are where. Yep.
But just for clarity of the record, we have not made revisions to the plans. They are exactly what was testified to. This was just an additional illustrative exhibit.
Right, last time you showed the elevation, I think, drawing for the 3-story building, where there's a different perspective of the 3-story building in the architectural set that you had displayed at the last meeting. So you couldn't see the 4-story buildings on the sides.
No.
And that's why you created the rendering you have tonight.
Exactly. We had no view from Webb.
Right.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Any other questions from the public for this witness? Okay.
Excellent.
What did they say? I'll borrow your power.
We're going to lose our exhibits in a moment. We just have to plug in. But while we're doing that, if I could call Brian Leff, we'll work to get him sworn in and qualified while we plug in.
Brian, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And if you could state your name and spell your last for the record.
Sure. My name is Brian Leff. Last name is spelled L-E-F-F. I am the president of BML Studio, licensed landscape architect and professional planner in the state of New Jersey. I've been qualified by this board, the zoning board, and several other boards in the area as a professional, and I am responsible for preparing the landscape plan associated with this application.
So you're providing only testimony related to landscaping?
Only landscaping. There will be a planner later. My testimony tonight is solely for landscaping.
We are offering Mr. Leff as an expert in the field of landscape architecture.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. All right, Mr. Leff is just going to pull up. We're going to pull up an exhibit here for the colorized landscaping. While we're doing that, the colorized landscape exhibit was previously submitted, but we're going to go ahead and mark that as A5 for the record.
Okay. There you go.
There we go. All right, Mr. Leff, there's been a number of questions about how the buildings will be landscaped. So if you could please walk the board through the proposed landscape plan.
Sure. The primary corridor that was of concern during the TRC and the council was really Kingsley Street. However, all frontages were equally important during the design. All frontages, or I should say 8th Avenue, 7th Avenue, and Kingsley all have ample plantings in front of the units. In most cases, the units are elevated above the street level, so the planting area would be on a sloped surface. In front of the recessed units on 7th and 8th, there are rooms for smaller ornamental trees in front of a few of the units. And since the units on Kingsley are set back just slightly further, there was room for a small tree in front of each of the units there. You'll notice on the exhibit, there are some trees along the streets that are kind of shaded out. They're just in the background. Those are the street trees that would be installed with the street improvement plan. They're not part of this application, but in the context of what we're proposing, we thought it would be helpful to show what will be coming as part of the streetscape improvements, although those are not part of this application.
What does that mean?
There is an agreement, a developer's agreement, that as each block gets developed, the primary developer is responsible for installing the streetscape. The developer of this application is not responsible for the installation of the streetscape. Beyond that, I'd have to defer to our attorney for the specific explanation.
That is correct. So pursuant to the redevelopment agreement and pursuant to the waterfront redevelopment plan and the infrastructure component report, the master developer is responsible for everything from the curb line out into the streets. So it includes the street trees, the curbing, the reconfiguration of the roads. And that infrastructure is done separate and apart from anything that's approved inside the property lines. In this case, I will say that the infrastructure around this block is likely to start well before the actual construction here. And in this case, likely that is going to happen, but the timing of the infrastructure improvements is governed by the documents of the City Council. Here, most likely, these improvements will start perhaps by the end of this year into next year, separately from what the planning board is reviewing this evening, which is the improvements that would be from the property lines in.
Not the street trees.
Street trees likely would not go in until much later, but the street improvements themselves, so when you talk about how the parking spaces on the street would look, when you talk about how the roadway widths would be, that's all governed by the infrastructure component report, and that's done by the master developer, independent of what occurs inside the property lines.
Yeah, I know we tread on what's part of this application and what's not, but because we are looking at this site plan, if we approve this application, it would necessitate the infrastructure improvements, right?
We would be,
of this block.
the master developer would be required to build all of the improvements before this block is finished.
And does that include kind of the improvements all the way across to the other curbs of 7th and 8th Avenue? 7th and 8th Avenues?
It technically only includes the one side of the block. In this case, I think the master developer has already put in plans to do more than that.
Okay. Thank you.
So you won't be talking about the shaded out streets?
No, I will not. I will not.
And you didn't design that or?
I did not.
Decide how many there would be?
I did not.
Okay.
So one unique part about this project that has come up and has influenced both the layout and the landscape design is the fact that the roadways 7th and 8th both slope down as you move in an easterly direction towards Kingsley, which necessitates the need for a couple small retaining walls. If you look at the site plan, I call it the T at the end, each side of there would be slightly above the sidewalk level, and there are retaining walls that are shown to make up that grade with plantings on top of it that would shield the headlights from shining out into the road while people are driving down those internal driveways. The intent of those walls is to have a height against the sidewalk of anywhere between 18 and 30 inches. That makes them sittable walls and doesn't require a railing on the top of it. So as people are walking down the sidewalk, they're free to sit on the top of the wall. The finish would be the same to match the building, so it would look architecturally compatible. All the plantings that are selected, I did provide some pictures. They're all obviously plants that are known to survive in the salty conditions, more specifically in Asbury Park. They include serviceberry, the Princeton Century ginkgo, which is more of an upright, narrow tree rather than a full-size shade tree to fit in some of the more narrow areas. We do have a variety of grasses and some plants that are just traditional to the shore, like knockout roses and hydrangeas, that I can't say are native, but they're certainly traditional plants at the Jersey Shore.
I'm sorry, the retaining wall was the dark blocks or?
Yes, if you look at the back driveway that runs top to bottom,
Yeah.
Specifically at the top one, there's a dark line right against the sidewalk. That would be the retaining wall.
Brian, can you zoom in?
Were the plantings on, or was it the sort of the grayed out?
I think I can zoom in.
It's not the one at the utmost bottom of the top.
They're on each side, yes.
Well, the one on 8th is longer, the one on 7th is short.
Where's your zoom on this?
Oh,
okay.
Yep. There we go.
Okay. So here you can see the retaining wall right along the edge of the sidewalk and wraps into the back corner of the building. Behind the retaining wall is a series of evergreen shrubs, and then behind that some lower ground cover and perennials. But from the roadway, what you would see is the retaining wall with the evergreen shrubs on top, and that would serve to block the headlights.
What is the dark, like hatched areas above that?
That's the sidewalk. This area here,
Right above that?
that right up in here, that's part of the streetscape improvements.
That's pavement?
Yes,
Brick pavers,
yes.
And then there's another, and that retaining wall is a seat height retaining wall, correct?
Yes, that would be
Okay.
between 18 inches and 30 inches in design so that you could sit on it as you're walking down the sidewalk.
And there's another retaining wall that is a seat height, correct?
The other retaining wall is at the other end of that same driveway, and it's not quite as large. It just comes off of the building and wraps pretty much towards the end of where that driveway would be.
Who retains those retaining walls?
That's all part of the developers. That's his property, they're responsible to maintain
The
that.
HOA.
HOA, yes.
Now, I'll have Mr. Curley talk about the two other retaining walls, which are more structural, correct? I think one of them is
Yes.
right there at the corner.
Yes, there is one that's shown right immediately next to this one unit. It was more of a cheek wall against the walkway that goes up to that one unit, just to get the grades to work. And while I don't think it is shown on this plan, the intention would be that the other side would also match and have a small retaining wall, very similar, right along this interior walkway.
Brian, actually scroll down. I think there's one at the south end of that building.
The other one is at the south end of the south building.
No, it's on the other plan.
Okay. If there are other retaining walls in this plan, would be updated to show those and would be included. I know there were some coordination issues with stoops and steps and porches that are not reflected on this particular plan, but we would revise the landscape plan to accommodate those features. I expect it to be very minor modifications, and I don't expect those modifications to change anything I'm testifying to tonight, but there would be those two other, most likely smaller cheek walls, we'll call
And
them.
the retaining walls on the sides, they're all within the property?
Yes, yes, they're all within the property. There's no construction within the right-of-way.
So let's sort of walk ourselves.
So more on the retaining walls. So the retaining wall ends up being kind of the same level as that driveway?
Yes.
The top of the retaining wall is level with
Yes.
the driveway? So it's not providing any screening to the driveway?
The wall itself is not. The wall is intended that you could sit on it. At one point, we had a fence on top of it to provide extra screening. I believe we've taken that out since, and we're just leaving the evergreen shrubs at the top to screen the headlights.
So if you could sort of just walk around the block as far as showing at the corners where there's going to be landscaping proposed.
Yeah, there is landscaping proposed at each of the corners. Because of the angles in the right-of-way, some of the planting areas do get narrow as you get to certain areas, certain points. But everywhere between the right-of-way and the buildings would be landscaped. Starting at the corner of 7th and Kingsley, these are the fronts of the units. You can see they all have plantings and a small tree in front of them. As we come down Kingsley a little further, there is a walkway that goes between the two buildings and gives a nice view of the central 4-story building. Originally, that building was twisted 180 degrees, and the view you saw was the back of the building. One of the key changes we made was to rotate that building around, add a new walkway in front of it, and enhance the view so it looks a lot better as you're looking through that corridor from Kingsley Street.
Brian, I don't mean to interrupt, but since we're on it, can you zoom into the walkway? So you have the plantings that are directly in front of the utilities. And another one of my issues is, can you tell us the blue to the left, you have them labeled as CB? Those right there, what's the height of those?
Those are going to be about 3 feet.
Right, so my issue with that is that you have a mid-block crossing, so if you're walking across, you're going to be, you know, if you're 5 feet, you have 2 feet of elevation, so you have cars parked there too. This might be more civil.
Well, also right up against the walkway, we also have a lower ground cover.
Which is probably 4 feet, so you have
ground cover. The ground cover, which is only like 6 to 8 inches high.
No, I'm sorry, 4 feet width, I'm saying. So my concern, again, might be more civil, is if you're walking across that walk and you're going across that, you know, you have a car potentially parked there and they're 4 foot questions.
They're 2.5 to 3 foot. They're not 4 foot. They're low, small flowering shrubs. They're nothing that's going to block a view. They're about knee high.
Okay. Yeah, that's, okay, again, I think it'd be more civil, but yeah, the cars parked there, but yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't, especially with even a child that's only 4 feet tall, I don't see any visibility issues with the selection of plants that's there.
Okay, thank you. In front of the utilities, those shrubs?
For the utilities are evergreen shrubs. Those may grow to 3 or 4 feet, intended to grow below the utilities. One of the challenges we have is how do you hide the utilities, but make it visible to the utility company? It's a catch-22.
You also have to like access them.
Right, right.
How would they access them?
The only ones that would actually need the access are shown there is no plants in front of them. I believe these are more the electric remote read meters that you can see them from the walkway.
Gets replaced.
These are the only ones that needed actual access to them. That was the water, I believe.
But if a meter, just like devil's advocate, if a meter needs to be replaced, how does the utility company access them?
Yeah.
What's your plan?
Yeah, they're small shrubs there, so they do it all the time. I don't see them. One, I don't see meter replacement being an everyday maintenance function. If they had to remove a plant or two for access, they would do it and then it would be replaced.
So if you're walking down that walkway, there's low shrubs and then there's meters on both sides at eye level?
Yes.
So if you can kind of.
But that is an internal walkway, and the only place you would see those meters clearly is from that walkway. And the only place that walkway leads is to the interior of the site. So unless you're a resident or a guest of the resident, that's really not going to be visible.
And then I would have the same question about buildings 1 and 4 where the meters are. I mean, are those going to be visible from Kingsley and 7th and 8th Avenue.
I think the engineer would be better to talk about the location of the meters and what each meter is. But the only place I see visibility is of the one transformer that's along 8th, 7th or 8th? 7th. And I believe there was some discussion that there may be alternative locations for that. But as it's shown now, this transformer would be the only utility structure that's clearly visible from the right-of-way.
And I'll ask Mr. Curley to go through each of the utilities when he testifies.
You said you had a fence at one time above the retaining walls, but you took them out?
Just at this one location at the end of the driveway, where we have the shrubs, the ground cover, and the retaining wall, we had a fence there, and there was some concern that the fence on top of the retaining wall would be overbearing for people walking down the street, that it would be too tall of a barrier.
But you want people to sit on the wall?
That's the intent is.
The
intent is to allow people to sit on the wall.
Really?
Yes.
That was a request that was made by the
That was a request from the
TRC.
TRC committee, correct.
Seawalls.
Are there any retaining walls on Webb?
That I don't know. There are no retaining walls on Webb, no. Webb is actually the high point of this site when you look at the grading, so there's no reason to raise those units up any higher.
So if you kind of continue down and around, just to establish that the landscaping does go.
Right, the
around.
landscaping continues all down Kingsley, does wrap the corner around 8th Avenue. When we get to Webb Street, the buildings are immediately against the right-of-way, or within a foot, I should say. And practically speaking, there's just no way to put landscape on the against the northern building, between the building and the sidewalk. That building is tight against there, and there's nothing that we can really plant along that one facade.
Unless you made it small. Unless you made the building small.
Or took one out.
As it's shown now, there's no planting strip along there.
But then in front of the three buildings,
In front of the three buildings that are facing
three-story
Webb.
building, I'm sorry.
Right, the three-story building that is facing Webb Street, there's an ample amount of landscaping in front of those, including small ornamental trees, flowering and evergreen shrubs, perennials, ground covers, grasses, very similar to what was shown in the previous exhibit. The southern building is pulled away from the right-of-way a little bit, and we did have some opportunity to add some evergreen shrubs along that building to soften the feel as you're walking down Webb Street. So the only place that does not have plantings between the building and the right-of-way is the northern four-story building as it's on Webb Street.
and then in the renderings, I don't think it was shown, but are there little planting spaces or between each of the driveways?
Yes.
So you have plantings on the easterly end of the building. Right?
Yes.
So, I mean, wouldn't it be better to give plantings to people instead of looking at a blank wall, shifting that down?
That I'd have to defer to the engineer who laid the site out as to the location of the building.
And we'll have Mr. Curley testify next. But as for the planting strips between the driveways?
Yeah, there was some comments and some concern that the buildings, when you looked at them from the back, from Webb Street, as you're looking down the driveways, that everything looked plain. Again, those renderings did not show any of the landscaping that's in the areas between the driveways for each of the units. The original plan just called for almost a monoculture planting. Everything did look the same. And one revision that we did make when we came to the planning board is varied the plantings in each of those islands to give a more attractive and aesthetic look and to soften so it doesn't look like a hotel.
What's the width of those strips?
Anywhere between 3 feet and 5 feet.
The ones that just low?
Low shrubs, ornamental grasses, perennials, nothing tall, no trees. There's not enough room for a tree. The roots would rip things up, and sometimes if the branches are lower, they interfere with the vehicles moving in and out. And quite frankly, not everyone negotiates around a tree into their driveway with success. So trees that are planted too close to driveways usually are short-lived. So that's the reason for no.
People will be driving, those same people will be driving over the street.
It does a lot less damage to your vehicle when you hit a shrub than a tree. But that being said, there is ample room for people to pull in and out of the driveways. They all conform, and the engineer can speak a little more to that. The idea is that the plantings step down lower and lower, so that as you get towards the actual drive, like the internal drive aisles, that you're almost down to a ground cover level at that point. So that as you're pulling out of your driveway, you have clear visibility in all directions.
So I would like dimension from the east edge of the sidewalk on Webb to the property line.
That I don't know.
I can have Mr. Curley testify.
Say it again.
I can have Mr. Curley testify as to the dimensions. I would like to just hit a few comments that were in some of the professional reports. I was going to ask you a question about the streetscaping that was in the CCH report, but you've already addressed that. So I will go straight to the engineering report that was dated September 5th. And item number 17, which asks about the caliber of the serviceberry tree.
Yes, normally the serviceberry is an ornamental tree, and it's often sold by height, so it's specified on the plan, I believe, is an 8 to 10 foot height plant, but does not give the caliper of the tree because it's a multi-stem tree. I can add a caliper, but in all fairness, when they buy it, it's going to be ordered by height, and the caliper is going to be a secondary measurement.
Or number of stems.
Right.
So that's fine, that's just something.
Yeah, it's a specification. He is correct. The internal trees, the Princeton Century ginkgos are specified by caliper.
And then comment number 18 was just asking us to add a note to the plans indicating that plants will be watered and replaced if dead or dying. That's acceptable, correct?
Yes, and I believe the intention is to have irrigated planting beds, but yes, any plants that died would have to be replaced.
So it's going to be sprinkled?
I believe, except for probably the areas between the driveways, but the front yards, I believe, would be irrigated.
Those are all the questions that I had for Mr. Leff as to landscaping.
Can he address how we're going to plant the slopes? My comment 4.5.
Sure.
Well, yes, the slopes on the, as I mentioned, most of the areas between the units and the sidewalks are sloped. I believe they're graded at a 3-to-1 or a 5-to-1 slope. The idea, we have larger evergreen shrubs against the units, and then smaller shrubs and evergreen or perennials and ground covers, grasses planted on the slope itself.
And when it meets the sidewalk, is there edging?
The planting bed would just match up to the edge of the sidewalk. It's common.
Yeah. So it's mulch, there's nothing to stop the mulch or dirt from going over
No.
to the sidewalk.
No.
With edging.
You could put a small curb there.
What metal edging?
Metal edging wouldn't do it. You would want the metal edging to be flush with the ground. That you would want something elevated if you're looking to stop the mulch. If you put an elevated metal edge, it becomes a tripping hazard, and the metal just never stays where it's supposed to be. It's a constant maintenance. If you're going to do an edge, I'd recommend a concrete curb to raise it up 6 inches and have everything come to the back of the curb. But if you have something that's just freestanding and higher than the planting bed, what you do is block all the stormwater and you just encourage ponding on the properties.
Is there any concern about
Part way. Part of it is the erosion, just the maintenance problem of stuff washing off to the sidewalk. Again, a little bit of curb is sort of okay, but I think, as we move into the engineering testimony, maybe there's, more of a grading solution.
I did look at an option at one point of continuing the retaining wall along the street frontage to try and raise that up. What that ends up doing though is these buildings are fairly close to the right of way, and you're going to be encouraging people to sit right outside of someone's living room window. So that
in a city, yeah. It would be kind of like brownstones in Manhattan, or,
I said my opinion was that The retaining walls just weren't appropriate in front of the units, but I'll leave that discussion to the board.
Students. No, it's on the sidewalk side. What are you talking about?
How wide is the planting area at the east end of the building on 8th Avenue?
I don't have that dimension, but you're talking about this area in here?
Yes.
The engineer can probably give a better answer, but I believe that's about 6 feet.
It does say 10 feet on the
10 feet, okay.
10 feet?
That's what it says on the site. The width of the curb to the, again, the engineer will testify to the width of the curb to the building says 10 feet on the site.
Donna, is the ginkgo tree something acceptable to you?
I'm sorry?
Is the ginkgo tree something acceptable?
Yeah, we really didn't have a problem with the plant list. I mean, we don't prefer knockout roses, but, you know, I know they're commercially acceptable. They're all over the place.
I'm particularly concerned about the ginkgo trees.
Yeah, ginkgos will be okay.
Can you get male trees?
Yes.
Well, it's century, so, right?
Yeah, it's a Princeton Century. It's a grafted tree to begin with.
So they're not gonna be smelly.
Yeah, no seeds.
No seeds, no smell.
So what are people's thoughts on the grading issue?
Maybe we get more engineering grading testimony.
Fine, fair.
I don't think anybody's gonna sit on these retaining walls, period. It's just not part of the culture of our place. I think they're there, but I doubt this is gonna be someplace that people really stop and sit.
They do serve another function, though. They do kind of block off the view at the garages. So
They're not tall enough for that.
No, not really.
No, but you got planted behind. I hear it.
Any other questions for this witness from the board or our professionals? Trying to think, Donna, was there anything else in your report we had to go over?
No, you know, we know Brian's work. He's, there's usually nothing too much to complain about with his plans, so.
Thank you.
I have one that's, again, this gray area of this application versus master developer. I do see there's like curb bulbs, curb extensions, and on the renderings, there's landscaping in those.
Again, that's all part of the streetscape. That's not part of this application.
I will say, so you're talking about the bump outs?
Yeah.
Yes. So here's what I will say about those. There's currently a request into council that's being reviewed by the city, again, independent of this application, but just to give context, to change the infrastructure component report to create those bump out areas that would then have a certain amount of landscape in them.
Okay.
So although it's not part of this application, we have shown what it could look like if the council decides to approve that change. If the council decides not to approve that change, then you would not have those curb bump outs. It would just be the regular curb returns.
I'm glad you put that request in, because the treatment at like First and Kingsley is so nicely done, and this kind of reminded me of that. So thank you for that.
I just have one question to follow up. So based on this plan, what is in the right-of-way area that is proposed in the current master developer plan, if you know?
What I'm showing is based on the master plan component report that's in the redevelopment plan.
Okay.
So this is the guideline. When they do their final planting, things may shift a couple feet in either direction, but it would still follow the idea that you're going to have a concrete sidewalk, a paver border, street trees, lights, benches, where those all fall into place may shift from this plan, what I'm showing, but they would all be there.
Okay.
And for example, the infrastructure component report doesn't say anything about the bus shelter that's at the corner. So that's something we have to manage, you know.
It's already
just
there,
between
right?
everybody who's involved in the bus shelter and bus
already
stop.
there.
I'm sorry?
The bus shelter's already there, right?
Yeah, but it's actually on the property. So it has to move off the property into the right of way, of which you know.
And I'll have Mr. Curley discuss that. It's mostly in the right-of-way today.
So, but, you know, the infrastructure component report, again, is kind of high level. It doesn't anticipate that there would be this many driveways for this block, for example. So the layout of the parking spaces doesn't anticipate this layout. And we'll have more testimony from Mr. Curley, I'm sure.
Okay. Any other questions from the board or professionals for this witness? All right, any questions from the public for this witness? So about landscaping and what we just heard testimony about.
Yes, hi, Karen May, 301 8th Avenue. Those of us in that house will have the joy of looking at the west side of the 8th Street building where it's right up against the edge of the property line. There's apparently not enough setback for you to put anything there. So that said, if you can zoom in on that a little bit, I would greatly appreciate. So my question, so that building is going to go right up to the sidewalk?
Yes.
There's no room for anything there? Fantastic.
The engineer can verify, but I believe the setback to that building is less than 1 foot. So there's no reasonable area that you can plant anything between that.
That's fabulous. Okay, now my next question is, if I look at the overall picture, I'm not seeing any grass anywhere, any space that is left, because right now it's all grass, or 95% grass, that lot. So everything is being either built or paved on, and you're putting, or the spaces that you've put shrubs on. There's no actual grass remaining anywhere on this entire city block.
No.
Fabulous. Last question, I don't know actually who this goes to, but you talked a lot about the master developer over the street redevelopment. Who approves that, and how do we get any say in that? Because that's a significant impact to those of us who live there, and I'm not aware of where that's happening because it seems to be outside of this.
She's asking about, I think, the infrastructure component plan.
The 8th Street, 8th Avenue changes.
Yeah, Ms. Smith can probably answer this better than anyone else.
Sure. So, and again, apologies for having my back to you, but the infrastructure component report is something that's already been approved by the council. The council has been asked to consider revising it to allow for those bump outs. But the infrastructure component report that sets forth the width of the streets, how the parking spaces go as far as angled versus parallel, that's all something that's already been adopted by the council and is part of the redevelopment agreement that was signed between Asbury Partners, the master developer, and the city. And the master developer has been implementing the street improvements in different parts of the waterfront. So you can see parts of the waterfront have been completed infrastructure-wise, some have not. This area has not yet been completed, but is scheduled to be the next area to be improved from a streetscape perspective.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because then I get, so any comments that I would normally send, you're Marie? You're Marie. So letters that we're sending to Marie from our house or the neighborhood would be separate. Would they still go to you if we were addressing questions around the parking and this infrastructure? Who would that letter go to? Because I have a number of questions around that.
City council.
That goes to the city council?
Are you asking about letters regarding the right-of-way infrastructure?
Questions, concerns about how they're pushing stuff out and what it's going to look like when we're all said and done?
Yeah, those have nothing to do with the application. The application's within the property lines.
This one, I understand, but if I have because in these pictures are things that are changing significantly for those of us who live here.
Right.
And have no off-street parking. And so we do have some questions here and or comments and concerns. So before it happens, especially if it's happening by the end of the year, who do we voice our questions or concerns to is my question.
You can send those questions and concerns to me. I'm the Director of Transportation for the city.
Okay.
I'm working also with City Council on those changes, so I will bring those to City Council for their review.
Direct.
And Ms. Smith, Mr. Curley will talk about parking.
Send that. Okay, thank you so much.
Mr. Curley will talk about parking, off-street parking.
Yes.
Okay.
Think. I think the rest is going to fall to the civil engineer. Because you don't do lighting, you're all landscaping.
Correct.
Okay.
Mike Cizorek, 305 8th Ave. Are there any, we've been talking about the retaining walls a lot, are there any actual renderings of what?
They were all shown in the architect's presentation. They're low, like I said, 18-inch to 30-inch high retaining walls. But they did show up in the architectural renderings.
Got it. And what color are they?
The same color as the building. They're designed to match the foundation.
Got it. And then what's the height of, the tallest kind of internal planting that you guys have on the inside?
When you say the height, there are some Princeton Century ginkgo trees that'll reach about 20 to 30 feet high.
That's on the outside.
That's on the interior. Most of what's on the interior is lower shrubs that are going to be 4 feet and lower. There are a couple other evergreen accent plants that would reach a height of 7, 8, maybe 10 feet. But for the most part, the internal landscaping is mostly shrubs and perennials.
So like the walkway that kind of splits in the middle there, so you're looking at Kingsley, you walk through. You said you guys added plantings there. What's the height of those kind of
They're about
plantings?
3 to 4 feet.
Yeah, and anything, did you guys think about putting anything larger there?
The problem we had there is you had the utility meter, so if we put anything larger, you block the view of the utility meters and the utility companies can't read them or access them.
Where's the utility meter?
On the sides of the building walls. These larger black boxes.
Got it. What about in front of the units right there? So there's plantings in
There are plantings in front of every unit.
Yeah, in front of the interior units. Did you guys think of putting anything larger there?
Did not for spatial reasons.
Got it. And is there anywhere on the interior where you guys considered putting, a larger tree or anything?
We absolutely considered it at a lot of places, but due to the spatial constraints and the nature of the development, there's simply no room for larger trees on the interior.
Got it. Yeah, like a previous commenter said, so there's no grass anywhere?
No, the grass was
inside or
left
outside?
out. Grass takes up a lot more resources. There's a lot more chemicals that go into the fertilization, the pest control. Shrub plantings and ground covers and perennials that are native are much more ecologically friendly and would look a lot nicer, and you don't get the lawnmower and weed whacker out there at 7 o'clock every Wednesday morning.
Sure. So on the exterior, on the street side, do any of those plants kind of encroach into the sidewalk or are large enough to, bushes that are going to grow into the sidewalk area?
No, the only thing down the line, some of the ornamental trees that are in the front, they have a couple branches that start to reach the sidewalk at a higher level. If that happens, they would just be pruned back. But the intention is not to have any plantings within the right of way.
Got it. And the elevation, so on the street, the plantings directly against the buildings here, what's the height of those going to be? I know there's some retaining walls, there's...
Again, around the buildings is mostly lower shrubs, 3 to 4 feet high, evergreens and smaller deciduous shrubs on top of that. You can see the ornamental trees that are shown, particularly along Kingsley in front of every unit, along Webb in front of the units that are fronting Webb, and at the recessed units along 7th and 8th, there are those ornamental trees that would be installed at 8 to 10 feet, could grow 12, 15 feet.
Got it. So if there were, a number of people walking to the beach there and they wanted to stop and, kind of move over, you would be stepping into mulch or plants or something else?
Well, you would be stepping out of the right of way on private property, but yes, you'd be stepping on someone's plants.
Yeah, got it. So it's going to be, the plants are going to be right up to the
Yes.
right up to the edge there. Got it. Okay. Yeah. Hold on, let's see here. Did you guys consider anywhere to put, some sort of public area here? Anywhere, that somebody could stand, either on the interior, on the exterior, like a pocket park or anything like that? Was that ever part of the development plan?
I was not involved in the original layout. That would be a question for the engineer. I'm not aware of whether that was or was not considered as part of this.
Is there anywhere you could put it how it's currently designed?
Not that I can see, no. Again, I would defer to the engineer, though, who is responsible for the site layout.
Got it. And on the interior, kind of the separation between the parking, I guess those are the garages, right? So there's how wide are those? 3 feet or 5 feet?
They're anywhere between 3 and 5 feet, I believe.
Yeah. You can't put anything larger in between, any plantings larger than?
Not without interfering. It's a small planting area to try and put larger trees. The roots would inevitably tear up the driveways and the internal roadways. And in my opinion, it does pose a circulation issue with some drivers.
Let's see, sorry, I'm just checking my notes here. So the trees on the street side, you said are going to be 20 to 30 feet tall?
They're planted, I believe they're specified as 8 to 10 feet as they get installed. They can grow to probably 15, 20 feet if they're perfectly taken care of, but they're meant to be smaller ornamental trees.
Got it.
Not larger shade trees. The larger shade trees would be part of the infrastructure.
That would be on the other side of the sidewalk?
Yes.
Got it. So on the, let's see, northeast corner there, is there a tree right at the corner of 8th and Kingsley? On the interior?
There is a small evergreen tree that's shown at the corner of that unit for an accent planting to accentuate the architect, but it's not a large shade tree. Again, the shade trees along the streetscape are going to be provided with the streetscape component that is not part of this application.
Got it. I'm just trying to figure out if there's, anywhere that, you could get some extra sidewalk area kind of in there. It's just so tight for, surfers, people walking their dogs. There's a lot of people that go to the beach right there, so.
Again, we're not encroaching into the right-of-way or the sidewalk area at all.
Got it. So
this is why I was asking about curb extensions, because if you look at other avenues where they cross Kingsley where we do have curb extensions, you do get extra wide green space at the corners, which, to your point, is nice to have. It's not currently allowed, which is why Ms. Smith mentioned they asked the city if
It
they
is
can
allowed in the infrastructure component report, it's just not specified at every corner.
Okay.
So that's why they're asking for this corner.
Thanks, Don.
And this sidewalk, so at the property line, there's the 4-foot sidewalk, and then there's like a 3-foot brick paver apron that runs to the curb. So between every tree, there is a kind of paved, it's not a consistent material, but this material represents, I don't know if you can see what I'm pointing out on here, so there's that.
If you don't mind, I'd like to just go over here.
Yeah, so there is, so the effective width of the sidewalk between every tree is wider than the paved area. It's sort of like the downtown condition, where we have that paver strip between the curb and the sidewalk. So in theory, the sidewalk is about 8 feet wide.
So the speckly is a cement, we're getting rid of all the slate, and that would be, sadly, that would be the cement. Then the grid lines to the right of that
Is a paver.
is a paver, so there's still, so we've lost grass there.
Correct.
Well, No, that's there on Kingsley.
No, the pavers are not there yet. Not
The
there.
pavers are there, so it's
Elsewhere further
Oh, no,
south
you're
in
right, I'm
Asbury,
sorry, it's
south
south
of
of there,
Bradley
yes.
Park, Atlantic Park, this is the treatment. It's 4 feet of sidewalk and then
So like in
3 to 4 feet of
Vive
pavers.
and-
So this will match the parts of the waterfront that have already been redone.
Yes.
If I'm correct.
And the Asbury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I just have one more question. So so on the northeast corner there where there's like a pink, it looks pink right there. So that's going to be an evergreen tree? Is that?
The one green one is an evergreen tree, the other ones are various shrubs and perennials.
Got it. So, and maybe this is a question for the civil engineer. Currently at the end of the street, right there, the side, the whole street widens about, I don't know, it's probably 20 feet on each side. So is that planting where the sidewalk sits right now?
That I don't know where the existing sidewalk sits in relation to what's being proposed. But again, we are not putting anything in the public right of way. All of the plantings are on private property.
Got it. Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the public to the landscape architect?
Going back to the building on the northwest corner of 8th and Webb, your westerly building, dwelling unit is right up against the property line.
Correct.
Within a foot. What would you consider the minimum width of a planting bed in that area?
It depends on what you're looking to plant. If you're looking to plant anything that would add a reasonable buffer, you'd probably need about, at a minimum, 3 to 4 feet, and that would be tight.
Okay, and that would kind of match the planting on the south?
That would more closely resemble that, yes.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Next witness.
I know we've deferred several questions for our civil engineer, so I'd like to bring up Mr. Curley now to give his presentation and testimony and to answer some of those questions. So as Mr. Curley sits down and gets sworn in,
Mr. Curley, you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Can you state your name for the record and spell your last, please?
Robert Curley, C-U-R-L-E-Y.
we are going to be offering Mr. Curley as an expert in the field of civil engineering. So to that end, if you could just briefly explain your education, background, and licensure.
I've appeared before this board wow, for a long time. Probably close to 18 years. So I was also working with the master developer, preparing the infrastructure, ultimate plans that get built throughout the waterfront. I've been the design engineer on numerous projects and presented before this board for quite some time as a licensed professional engineer and a professional planner. But I'm here just to get engineering testimony.
Excellent. So we do present Mr. Curley as an expert in the field of civil engineering.
Yeah, Barbara always asks, your license is up to date?
Yes, it is.
Okay, then yes, thank you.
Wonderful. So Mr. Curley, there's been a number of questions that have been asked so far. I was going to ask you to start with the subdivision, but if you'd prefer to start somewhere else, please feel free.
So based upon I was going to do a little bit different presentation, but based upon the quantity of questions that arose on the infrastructure and what is ultimately going to look like surrounding the property, I just would like everyone to understand that right now, the roadway widths, in particular on the avenues, are going to be substantially increased. The cartway width. So the pavement is going to get closer to the property lines. And what that's going to do is going to provide an opportunity on 8th Avenue to put in an island and have angled parking for the entire length. And likewise on 7th Avenue, it'll be the same. There will be on 7th Avenue, Kingsley Street, and
8th Avenue, there will be a 12-foot wide between the curb and the edge of the back of the sidewalk. So currently, right now, there's arbitrary sidewalk widths of in the range of 4 to 5 feet. So that's what will exist with the infrastructure improvements that are currently being proposed. Bless you.
So you're saying the street widths of 7th and 8th Avenue are actually going to decrease?
That's correct.
What is the current? Are they 200 feet there? That's not the flare out on those streets, right? What is the street width now?
They range somewhere in, well, the cartway where
Curb to curb.
I don't want to say a wrong dimension. I don't know that answer. What I can tell you is that the improvements that we're proposing will provide for equal amount of parking that exists today as when it will be completed after the finished product is done. So there currently is 45 parking stalls surrounding this block. When we are done, there will be 45 parking stalls when we're finished.
No, I know, but I thought you said you were increasing.
That's correct.
The street.
That's correct.
So it's going to be increased.
So we're providing and I don't have the,
If you don't have it,
I don't want to indicate an incorrect dimension, and in particular because of the bump outs on the corners, there's some narrowing there, and we're providing for 24-foot wide aisles. So again, I don't want to give you a wrong dimension. I absolutely can get those dimensions for the board if it's.
I don't think we're wrapping this up tonight, so that's fine.
But all of that, though, is that, just so we're clear.
To your point, that's not part of this application.
I understand.
But there are, I brought it up because of the quantity of questions that have been asked and the concerns of the residents.
I understand. So one of the things the residents say is that the street will be widened, and there will be a new median. There's no median there now?
Not on 8th Avenue.
So there will be.
That's correct.
Planted median?
That's correct.
Dan, we have an exhibit that was sent to us. It's called Block 4306 Aerial, and it shows. I'm sorry, it's the one that's called CO2 layout, and it shows the existing kind of satellite view and then the plan laid over it, so you can see exactly what the new plan looks like over the old street. So you can see where the widening occurs. What is this?
Okay.
CO2.
The other one.
Next one.
Is it this one?
And 8th Avenue is not like the other avenues. It's not angled.
And that was another opportunity that I wanted to express because of the some of the concerns over the layout of the overall block. This block has a flare out on the south end, which is 7th, and then it's a 90-degree intersection on 8th. So that does present some layout concerns as far as wanting to try to make sure that you keep frontage of the dwellings parallel to the street. And that was the mission.
Okay. In fact, with Michael, I think you're referencing.
Yep.
And why don't we go ahead and label that?
It actually shows, there's 100-foot width on 8th Avenue currently, and it does actually depict.
Well, that's the right-of-way width, not the
Right-of-way
right-of-way
width
width. Right.
That's not the car.
But what you're looking at is, yeah.
And
But it looks like, I understand, with the angled parking, are you actually going to be gaining more space?
That's correct.
That's what he shows.
And I'd like to just make sure we mark this one for the record as A6, and can you just describe what this exhibit is?
So what I did was I wanted to have an exhibit to depict and this is a Google Earth aerial. So this is probably a little aged, but it's pretty close. So it's got a Google Earth aerial underneath of the dimensioning plan that is part of the set, which is page 2 of the overall engineering plans. So the point I was trying to get to is to understand that if this is a 90-degree corner and we're trying to maintain the building frontages to provide access from the front of the dwelling onto a sidewalk area. We didn't want to have a variable width. We kept a consistent width across the frontage of all of the fronts of the buildings to the sidewalk, to the edge of the sidewalk that's going to be constructed. And what that ends up doing is, because we have a square layout on the north end and an angled layout on the south end, yes, there's going to be a variable corner that occurs, and it ends up occurring at the west end of the most southerly building.
What do you mean that they have equal space? Because some of them are set back, right?
Well, there's a jog. The jog's in the building, that's correct, but they're all parallel to the sidewalk. So the closest, in particular for building number 1, the closest building frontage to the edge of the building to the back of the sidewalk is 8 feet.
Now, when you're looking at that, the ones that front on 8th Avenue, it appears that the two ends, are they wider buildings than the ones in between?
That's correct. The end units are a wider unit, that's correct.
So, that'll go to, the question about the planting, that the one at the westerly end is right abutting Webb Street, and there's not sufficient room for planting. So if it were actually a lesser width, there would be more room for planting. Or if it was shifted down, where you have the planting at the easterly end of that road, if that was either split or moved to the westerly, then we could have some plantings on the Webb Street, that end building.
That's a correct statement, yes.
Would that be difficult to do?
Would that be difficult?
So those would be one-car garage units, which are the interior units.
That's not the intent. The intent would be to shift the building to the east to provide an equal separation distance from the curb line to the building line. And as Mr. Leff indicated, to provide a 4-foot area for plantings adjacent to the sidewalk. That could be accommodated, yes.
But that's something that we probably should discuss with the applicant.
I'm sorry?
But that's something we should discuss with the applicant as far as the ability to move that down.
Yeah, and Dan, you probably wouldn't want the narrower units on the end anyway, because the end units have windows and stuff on the side that give them visual interest, so.
Well, I don't want narrow units, but I think the issue is to have some planting.
Yeah. Oh, well, agree, yeah.
When the whole road down or what?
Oh, agree, 100%.
Okay. So if you can continue talking, there's been a number of questions about setbacks, so perhaps you can walk around the building identifying the relevant setbacks.
So again, the minimum distance between the edge of the pavement and the back of the sidewalk on 8th Avenue, on Kingsley Street, and on 7th Avenue will be 12 feet. And what that does is provides for a much wider walking experience as you're going down the road, and it also provides for providing street trees and street lights, and the street lights are going to be in accordance with the infrastructure component report, and the street trees are going to be in conformance with the waterfront redevelopment.
And then what is the
plan.
setback from the property line to each of the buildings?
So for building number 4, from the from the property line to the building is 8 feet.
So that would, for example, in that location, it would be between the building and the curb would be approximately 20 feet. Is that
That's correct. The building to the back of the sidewalk is 8 feet.
And then from the
The
back,
sidewalk, the back of the sidewalk to the curb line, minimum distance, whoops, excuse me. Tough fingers here. The minimum distance from the building to the edge of the pavement would be 20 feet.
So that 8 foot is the steps and the planting area.
That's correct.
That's on the north side?
Pardon?
That's on the north side?
Correct, on 8th Avenue, on the
8th
north
Avenue
side.
Okay.
All right, if you could look at the same along Kingsley Street, please.
So the side setback for building number 3 is again consistent with the alignment of building number 1. Make sure I said that right. 4, excuse me, building number 4. 8 feet to the building to the property line on 8th Avenue. And then from the building to the property line on Kingsley Street is 11 feet. So again, the minimum distance that we're going to be talking about between the proposed building and the edge of the pavement would be 23 feet. And that's consistent for building number 3 and building number 2. Now, the side setback for building number 2 is 2 feet at this corner. That's the closest. And then
It's still 12 feet from the back of the sidewalk to the curb.
so that's correct. And actually, so, correct, without the bump out. And that's correct.
And how about building number 1?
Building number 1, again, has a consistent frontage setback to the property line of 8 feet. And again, you would have another 12 feet to the edge of the pavement. So that would be 20 feet from the building to the edge of the pavement, the shortest distance.
And how about on the side as you wrap around Webb?
So the shortest distance we have is 3 feet to the property line. And then on Webb Street, we have an 8.5 foot wide total from the curb face to the back of the sidewalk is 8.5 feet wide.
So at the most narrow point in that building, am I doing the math right, that's still 11.5 feet?
That's correct. From the building to the paved edge
And what is it at the corner?
at,
The corner of 7th and Webb? Looks like the setback.
I'm sorry, it's 6 feet at the most southerly edge, but at the northerly edge of building number 1, it's 3 feet.
And then how about the 3-story building on Webb? What are the setbacks there?
11 feet, so 11 plus 8.5 would be 19.5 feet to the edge of the pavement.
Okay. All right. So you've talked about the setbacks. Before we get too far off the setbacks, if you could just discuss the proposed subdivision briefly.
And this has been completed on a number of applications that have been before the board previously. This is a temporary, and I say that, it's a temporary subdivision in order to affect the Fannie Mae financing that's associated with soils that have been deemed as contaminated.
So it will help facilitate the remediation, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Now, in the subdivision, we're proposing, there's currently 8 lots that make up the block, is that correct?
That's correct.
And after the subdivision, how many will there be?
There will be 3.
And will each of those 3 lots comply as to the total size of each lot and the frontage of each lot?
Yes.
And then I think we've indicated that the lots will be actually consolidated into one lot prior to the final certificate of occupancy, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. I just briefly want to touch upon a few items. The first is on-street parking. How many on-site parking? How many total parking spaces are proposed on-site within the property lines?
114.
And how many are actually required?
68.
So 68 are required, but 114 have been provided. And will those spaces be located both in garages and then also in external driveways?
That's correct.
All right. I'd like to talk a little bit about the pedestrian access and walkways internal to the site. I know that there was testimony earlier about how the building in the middle was actually flipped around. Mr. Leff testified to that. Can you talk about how that then facilitates pedestrian movement within the interior of the lot?
So for all of the buildings, when you come out of your front of your dwelling, you'll be able to access a sidewalk to be able to provide pedestrian circulation around the block. For the interior building, when the building was flipped, we added a sidewalk that would facilitate pedestrian access ultimately to the exterior of the block, and that would be across the front of the building with sidewalk access to a common sidewalk, and then ultimately we have it connected through the two buildings with another piece of sidewalk that would connect out to Kingsley Street.
Okay.
Could you just go back to this diagram up there? So I noticed on 8th Avenue, the buildings that front on 8th Avenue, they sort of respected the sight lines of, well, if you go back, zoom out again, please. You can see, it's sort of, you respected the sight lines of the houses to the west, that you don't really encroach, you don't go further to the sidewalk than they are. But on 7th Avenue, now those houses, someone sitting on the porch where they could look down the block, now they're looking at the side of your building. You didn't respect the setbacks.
Well, that may be true for the corner unit, but this larger unit back here, that's absolutely more forward. The building, this still follows the right-of-way and follows the flare, so it still maintains the visual that would ultimately occur as you're walking down the sidewalk. This does not at all impede, and if anything, it's going to increase the visual effect down 7th Avenue when we widen the roadway.
But not for those homes, not for those owners.
And this application is for a 4-story building, whereby an 8-story building could easily be constructed. So we're absolutely understanding that we're providing a new development on an existing block that hasn't had any development on it for a substantial amount of time. The waterfront redevelopment plan allows building setback all the way to the right-of-way line. That's not what we're proposing. We've kept in character with the townhome development with the thought process to have a front of the unit that would be accessing onto the sidewalk. So we've provided a small front yard area, and I believe it's in the spirit, absolutely in the spirit of the waterfront redevelopment plan.
I'm not suggesting you're not within your rights. We don't rehash history. The lot wasn't developed for a number of reasons, right? That development rights were held up for over a decade, and then 56 acres was subject to condemnation until there was arbitration between the city and the master developer. So let's not get there. The simple point of the fact I'm saying is you do now block those sight lines from those homes, which were formerly open down the block. I'm just pointing out a fact.
Okay. One just quick question. We had, on one of the renderings, it showed a mid-block crosswalk across, I believe it was Kingsley. That is not proposed, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Internal circulation, in the CCH report, I think it was 2.1C, there was a question about vehicle circulation when it comes into those areas along 7th and 8th, kind of between the buildings that's internal to the site. Is there a sufficient width there for cars to turn around?
The cartway width is 24 feet wide, plus the driveway on the end units is actually 20 feet in length, not the required 18, which is with the jog on the more internal units. So if the vehicle were turning in here, and again, the end unit, which I believe would be considered the most difficult, it still is easily accommodated back out, and then K-turn, and then leave. There's very similar to any parking lot that you would be parking in any of the commercial uses that surround the area. If anything, it's deeper because of the driveway being 20 feet in length, not the 18.
There's also a question about trash truck circulation. Can you talk about how a garbage truck could circulate this site?
So this would be private carting, and in particular for the residents, that would be, at the end, they would bring their garbage cans to the end of the driveway. The garbage truck would come into the development, make the turn, have the back of the truck, and then they'd have to wheel the garbage cans to the truck and have them empty that way.
I'm sorry, so they're gonna haul their.
There would be no backing down.
So someone's gonna haul it themselves.
That's correct.
Not the homeowner, the company, correct?
Understood, yeah.
Right, like the homeowner is not.
Private carting, correct.
I'm sorry. Say that again? So
a
the
garbage
truck's gonna
truck,
come down,
garbage truck can come in the development,
Right.
pick up the garbage, in
left.
particular for the 3 units that would be on the T portion of the development. The garbage truck would stop, and they would have to wheel the garbage cans from the driveway to the garbage truck and bring them back.
The workers.
Correct.
We've also had questions about utility meters. Can you talk about the location of each of the utilities, at least as far as they're proposed, with the understanding, for example, that transformers ultimately have to be approved by the individual utility?
So our proposed meters, we listened hard to comments from the technical review committee and cited the utility meters on the sides of the buildings that would not front out onto any of the streets. So in that vein, on the internal 2 shorter buildings, we have them on the north side of the building. And then on the east side of the 2 longer buildings that are on 8th Avenue and 7th Avenue, and then in between the 2 buildings on Kingsley Street. So again, as not to have them fronting out onto any roadway.
Can I ask a question about those? So I see, particularly for the 2 buildings on Kingsley Street, there is a sprinkler room that's west of the utility meters. And I'm wondering if there's any opportunity for the sprinkler room to be closer to the street than the utility meters, so the meters are kind of hidden behind them.
That might be an architect's question.
I would,
I asked the
I would not
architect,
want
he said to ask the
to, I would not want to commit to something like that. That would be a mechanical or the architect that would need to answer that one.
So I think part of the confusion with that question, though, is, how the runs are made from the meters and from the sprinkler room through the units versus how are they accessed from the outside, what drives the grading or the height of them.
But you see my point from Kingsley Street.
Yeah.
If the sprinkler room was east, you wouldn't see the meters. But now that's going to be, that can be the thing you see, but you'll be able to see them.
More prominently visible.
More prominent. Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
I ask a question about the sightline on the 7th and Webb. So you have 3. No,
Excuse me.
So
Sorry
you have
about that.
3, 5, 7, 10 units, right? If you push those 3 units at the corner back, pull the 2 units forward, push the 2 units back, pull the 2 units forward, and push that final one to the right back.
You don't have enough driveway depth for the end unit on the west end. Or you'd have less than what they're,
On that closest one.
right.
And
Okay.
Because we have a 20.
The
That's
other
a
reason why I was
25,
going to ask that is because you have utilities proposed very close to the right-of-way. And if you push that right one back, you're pushing those utilities back and they could be shielded a little bit better.
are those the utilities along the internal accessway between building 1 and building 2?
So the one between, I can't see if that's, yeah, I guess that's number 2 on the right. Yes. So you have those utilities, those 3 banks of utilities, fairly close to the right-of-way.
It's a sprinkler room and 2 meter stacks.
Yeah. And then Mr. Curley, can you just describe the location of, I think, the black square, we'll call it?
So this is a proposed transformer?
Okay. And
Maybe something about
So you have the transformer and then you have the 3
on the building.
2 things are meters, and 1 thing is a sprinkler room.
sprinkler room.
Yeah, right there, that's the
Right.
gas electric.
It seems like they're those meters are going to be very close to the right-of-way there.
I think
Well, they'd be set back probably about 10 feet from the right-of-way.
the other location that those could be is on the Webb Street side of the building, correct? And were they specifically chosen to be in that location?
Well, I would agree. They shouldn't be on the Webb Street side.
But this
That's
again
correct.
goes to, if you put the sprinkler room closer to the street, then, the meters are not so visible.
Yeah, that's kind of my point.
Yeah.
You're very close to the right-of-way there, on a very prominent road.
Yeah. Just while we're paused, we have about 12 minutes left.
Okay. I think we can go through Mr. Curley's testimony. Very quickly, I have just a handful more questions I think we'll be able to finish up. Retaining walls, Mr. Curley, can you describe the locations of the 2, Mr. Leff covered the retaining walls that are kind of in those sections between the buildings. Can you just describe the retaining walls at the corners and why they need to be there?
And just so that the board understands, there were some comments in our initial review that we had, and I was able to modify the plan slightly to provide it for a constant wall height of 24 inches for both this south wall and for the north wall in this area. So both of those retaining walls are now a consistent 24 inches in height. The 2 knee walls that come out at the end of each unit makes up the difference in elevation from the stoop. We could have an exposed stoop and soften the grading here and get rid of this wall. We felt that providing this retaining wall provided more of an opportunity to put plantings in and provided just a better design. And we were consistent on both ends with that. And this would range in height from about 30 inches down to 2 feet.
Okay.
I know you're not on the grading plan, but on the grading sheet in the site plan set, on the southerly corner of building 3, there's a retaining wall, sort of. So that was one of the ones I had called out. I'm not sure this is supposed to be here or if it needs to be here, but you've got one of those knee walls sticking out from that building corner on the grading plan.
North side, so if you keep on the building up, you're
Sorry.
right there, yep, on the south side of the building 3, yep.
Again, it doesn't show
Yeah,
up
it doesn't.
on that set. It shows up on the grading plan.
I'm sorry about that.
So page 3 of your set.
So, it kind of matches what's going on at the other corner.
Is it your preference to have a retaining wall there or not to have a retaining wall there?
It's just, we need to make sure he needs it or not. I'm not going to say hearing wise, but
It's not hash, I honestly think it might have just been.
it might have been from a previous
Yeah,
version or
yeah,
something,
yeah.
so I'm thinking. But
That can be corrected then.
Yeah.
All right, I do have a few more questions. One, we talked about the bus shelter. Can you talk about the relocation of the bus shelter briefly?
So as part of the infrastructure,
I'm sorry. No, go ahead and finish. Sorry.
so currently the bus shelter is on private property, and that needs to be relocated. The coordination of that relocation of the bus shelter is going to be coordinated with the New Jersey Transit, and it'll be part of the infrastructure component or infrastructure construction plans.
It's mostly in the right of way right now, right? Just it encroaches a bit into the lot, correct?
It's a few feet onto our property.
Let's talk about lighting. If you could briefly describe the proposed light fixtures, and also just to address a note, is it correct that the plans either have been revised or will be revised to indicate a color temperature of 2700 or below?
Yes, they have.
Okay.
They were modified with the resubmission that occurred after our first review.
Okay.
Okay, keep going.
It is designated there. It's smaller text and it's in the box, but it's definitely designated there. So the lighting plan that was in and that is in the engineering set includes all of the street lights that surround, all of the proposed street lighting that surrounds the development. And those foot candle values were also included in the engineering set. And one of the comments that was indicated in, I believe it was in the architectural review, indicated that there was light spillage off of our property. When I turn off the lights that surround, that are proposed for the part of the infrastructure, there is absolutely no light shedding from our property at all. So the light fixtures that we're proposing are consistent with the street fixtures, although they are going to be slightly different. Again, we're going to make sure that our color temp is 2700, and the light fixture height is 16 feet.
Right. In the engineering report dated September 5th, there were 3 comments about exterior lighting. That's comments 14 through 16. It's asking, the first 2 ask for notes to be added to the plan about cabling supply electricity being installed underground, and one was about light fixtures shall be non-glare, fully cut off, and fully shielded.
That's correct.
And
And they'll be, they're night sky compliant fixtures.
So the applicant can comply with 14 and 15, correct?
And 16.
And 16, excellent. All right. Briefly, if you could discuss compliance with stormwater regulations for this site.
So part of the challenge that we had with our site was to ensure that for future development, that we would be compliant with the flood hazard regulations, and that's kind of what set up the grading for the overall property. How we're handling the drainage on the site is there's a below grade detention facility that'll handle quantity, and we're providing for water quality for the newly paved area for the driveways and for the driveway throughout the site. We're using a Filterra green infrastructure sedimentation structure that ultimately discharges into the stormwater management system. So it cleans the water before it gets into the below grade detention facility.
And although
The
this,
water that goes into the below grade detention facility is strictly from the buildings itself, and they're all connected via roof runoff connection pipes.
and although the stormwater systems are going to be reviewed by the DEP in connection with compliance with the CAFRA permit, is it your opinion that what you've designed complies with current stormwater regulations?
Yes, and that's also based upon an initial review that was completed by the DEP.
Just do want to go back for one moment. There was a question about this layout concerning the driveway locations and how cars are going to access the site and where their headlights will be. If you could briefly describe kind of how these driveways relate to the houses that are across the street. And for this, we'll mark another exhibit, it's A7. What should we call this one?
Headlight exhibit.
Okay.
That's what it's entitled. So if I can, I'm going to come right back to this exhibit, but I do want to look at the overall aerial. So our driveway that is on the south end that would enter out into Webb, and again, Webb Street is a one-way street, and that would be a right-hand turn leaving our driveway. What's directly opposite our driveway for a vehicle exiting is an existing garage. And it's a two-car garage.
That's a freestanding garage, correct?
That's correct. So what we wanted to focus on was the northern driveway and understanding any potential impacts that we may have on the adjacent residents. So in doing so, we looked at a couple of things. We looked at the location, and then we also looked at the elevation of the proposed or the existing roadway that we're tying into and the existing finished floor of the adjacent dwelling that's across the street. So in looking at the roadway elevation that exists today in comparison to the finished floor of the adjacent of the dwelling that's across the street is approximately 5.5 feet above the existing roadway. When a vehicle comes, when a vehicle is going to be exiting our site and turning onto Webb Street, making a right-hand turn, his lights that would potentially be shining out is going to be well below any existing windows that exist on the east side of the structure. And again, we are 5.5 feet, the roadway is 5.5 feet below the finished floor. So if you say that the lights are up 2.5 feet, so we're still 3 feet below the finished floor for any lights that would be shining straight out of the vehicle and then turning onto Webb.
We're out of time. Okay. Obviously, Mr. Curley hasn't finished his testimony yet, so Mr. Curley next time will finish his testimony. The board is going to have questions, our professionals will have questions, the public will have the opportunity to ask him questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to it tonight, but we are out of time. So I guess we need to do two things. First is, I just kind of want to summarize some of the things that we've discussed as far as things we would like the applicant to consider. So I'll summarize what I have and people can jump in. But we mentioned, can colors and materials be varied throughout the project? Can there be more interest in the treatments of the corners or sides of the buildings that are going to be prominently visible from the street? We discussed, possible rotation or movement of Building 1 to maintain a 7th Avenue corridor. We discussed considering moving Building 4 a few feet to allow plantings on Webb. We discussed can sprinklers rooms be switched so they're closer to the sidewalk than meters. Is there anything else that we wanted them to look at?
I think he said the new lights are going to be different than the existing lights, so can you bring us a picture? The old ones and the new ones? The infrastructure.
Yes, absolutely. And those details are, they are. They're identical to the street lights, they're going to be shorter.
Sorry.
That's the only difference?
Correct. And the luminaire in our on-site lights will be color temperature 2700.
But the street lights will be the same ones that are already on Kingsley Street further
That's
south.
correct.
Okay. Anyone have anything else we want them to look at before they come back? Sorry.
The additional width of the street being widened.
Oh, yeah. If we could have dimensions of the streets, that would be great. Okay, so we're gonna have to carry this. First I'll ask, you're okay with an extension of time?
Well, I'd like to know when you're proposing to carry it to first.
Okay, fair enough. Marie, what dates do we have?
Questions, is anything going to be revised, resubmitted, anything of that nature?
You're going to do it as an exhibit, not a plan change.
Right.
What's available, and then I can take 2 seconds to ask.
So, sorry, in case anybody can hear me.
There's something on the 7th, right?
The 7th is a possibility if there's nothing being changed. We already have one application before you that schedules.
Right. We could do half a meeting on the 7th.
Half a meeting on the 7th.
The 28th, we have nothing so far.
The 28th, there's nothing. There's a full meeting available on the 28th. There's a full meeting available on the 18th of November.
If you'll give me 2 seconds, let me just confirm.
Is Barbara going to be back for the 20th?
Yeah, Barbara's not going to be here still.
Wait, Dan, you're not going to be here?
It just makes more sense to get the whole meeting to several things and.
Why not? Oh, you gonna go hang out with Jim Henry? Jim Henry?
That's a really good question.
I was thinking down that Get your laugh.
On both buildings. This whole thing can.
You know, because even, but they've got 10 feet of that in.
Oh, no, this building can be shifted this way. No, John's saying these driveways are 20 feet. If these driveways were 18 feet, and these driveways were 18 feet, then this whole building could go 4 feet that way.
Yeah, that's K-turn. There's a lot of K-turn there.
Well, not only that, 20's in here.
Well, it's less. Yeah, but it's
off of Web.
Yeah, but it's one-way street. Nobody's going from their driveway back into the development. No, Web is a one-way street. So
Sorry, thank you. We just, before we committed to a date, we wanted to make sure everyone was.
Yep.
So, because we'd like to consider looking at the plans, we think, although we would love to be here for the 7th, we think October 28th is probably more realistic.
Okay.
So if we could be carried to October 28th, we would appreciate it.
All right. I'm going to make a motion to carry this application to October 28th with no further notice.
trust me, you don't want to fight anybody on the 7th.
Since you're going to redo an whole thing, yes, I think it's going to be back.
October 28th.
Yeah, before we carry it, John, go ahead.
I didn't get a question.
John had just a question for the engineer.
I believe you said the driveways are 20 feet. They only have to be 18.
That's correct.
So when you're re-looking at everything, since we're not meeting next week or anything, can you look, if you made them 18 feet, can we shift the building 4 feet to give that, because it may be 8 feet? Can the driveways be shortened to 18 feet, and then we shift everything to like give more room on Webb Street for plantings?
I don't know if that does that.
No, but you could move the 7th Avenue buildings back.
Correct.
You can move something back, but
Yeah, it's only
down
20
2 feet
feet
on each
anyway.
driveway.
Yes.
It's 2 here and 2 there, it's 4 feet.
Yep. I think there may be issues with that, but we understand that you'd like us to take a look.
Yeah, okay.
And we'll
Right, just look into it.
look into it.
Not telling you until the
Yeah.
next meeting.
Thank you. So the motion is to carry this to October 28th with no new notice. I motioned, Jim seconded. Let's go.
James Bonanno?
Yes.
Councilwoman Clayton?
Yes.
Eric Gallipo?
Yes.
Jim Henry?
Yes.
Mayor Moore?
Yes.
Daniel Shinameo? Jen Souter?
Yes.
Vice Chair Gunnin?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Motion
if-
to,
Yeah, motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn?
If an extension of time is needed, we would allow an extension of time to the 28th. But-
So anyone here for this application, just understand, there will be no new notice. The next meeting will be October 28th at 7 PM.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.